Chapter 908. This was their resentment. No one would want to stop such resentment, including Helly and Vivian. Children were that simple. However, there were people who used their simplicity as a tool to hurt them countless times. No matter who these people were, she had to get to the bottom of it. Right at this moment. Suddenly there was a commotion outside. Suit Manus pressed the blue headset on his ear and looked up at Helly and Vivian. "Boss, the higher-ups are here. They should be the local armed forces." Just as S finished speaking, a deafening loudspeaker sounded. "To the people inside, listen up. You have been surrounded. It seems that no matter in America or China, this excuse will not change." S laughed. Obviously he was very experienced in dealing with such situations. "Boss, what should we do next? Should we retreat immediately or wait for them?" Helly and Wei Wei smiled meaningfully. "Let's not do anything but dismantle the pistols first." According to their plan, the Flying Tigers should have already boarded the train in the other carriages. The broadcast was just to distract us. This means that they already have a plan. This time we won't wait for them, nor will we retreat immediately. We'll bring all the children out of the sleeper carriage and let them see what kind of deal is going on this train. Not retreating? As Suit Man S spoke, his eyes glanced in the direction of Bailey Jiaju. Then he said quietly, "Then how do you explain why the plane was parked on top of the car?" Helly and Vivian looked at him. "His son is missing. It is natural for a father to look for him." "Son? Father?" The man in the suit paused abruptly. He looked at Bailey Shangxie, then at Bailey Jiaju. Suddenly he recalled the scene he saw when he came in. Finally he rested his gaze on his boss and said, "It can't be what I think it is, right?" His boss had never allowed a man to question her in public. However, no matter how powerful the other party was, Boss Wei should be able to avoid him. However, his boss tolerated his kiss. After calming down, Suit Manus realized that there must be something between his boss and the other party. "It's exactly what you think it is." Helly and Wei Wei's expression was very calm. Suit Man's facial expression began to become complicated. He couldn't help but feel that the little bro brought back looked a little like his boss right from the start. It turned out that he was not mistaken. All of this was real. In other words, the man that boss had flirted with was here. I'll say it again. The people inside, listen up. You've already... The noise outside the car continued. The man in the suit, however, felt as if his entire body had been smitten. No. He had to let Monkey and the others know about this first. Thus, the man in the suit pressed the button on his ear as he walked to the sleeper compartment. The man who was flirted with by the boss is here. When Monkey heard the news, he was teaching the 3 children he had brought over how to play video games. He paused and immediately jumped up. "What? Where is it? Aren't you on the train?" "Yes, it was on the train. You should have seen the news about someone parking a plane at the train stop. The man who drove the plane was the one who slept with the boss," the man in the suit said firmly. Olde looked like a bear and had similar thoughts. How much hatred do you think he has? In order to get even with boss, this man actually drove a plane and chased after us. Helly and Vivian. Speaking of which, it was because of little boss that the man discovered boss's existence. The more the man in the suit spoke, the wider his smile became. "I think boss would never have thought that the other party's father would be the man that she slept with. Alright, you should remember the little boy who was abducted with little boss, right? That's him. Every dog has its day. Didn't boss say that the other party was a scumbag? Now that she has seen him in person, hee. Helly and Vivian reached out and pressed the earpiece. "If you say one more word, your commission will be reduced by half." Hearing this, Monkey immediately gloated. Commission should have been reduced by half long ago. "But boss, did you really sleep with the father of the little boy that you asked me to investigate?" Helly and Vivian heard this and raised her eyebrows. Participating in discussions that have nothing to do with the mission will result in a 0 commission. Monkey's smiling face immediately froze and the corners of his mouth twitched. "The mastermind's commission will only be reduced by half, but the accomplice's commission will be reduced to 0. This is how I treat you." Helly and Wei Wei simply looked at her own happiness, completely emitting the aura of a queen. As for Old Six, who had seen Beligaju's destructive power with his own eyes, he grabbed the door and locked himself in another compartment. However, he was still worried and looked at the dining compartment vigilantly. He dragged his long legs and walked forward step by step, desperately calling for help from the special forces. Right now, Old Six would rather be captured than be with this group of monsters. That's right, in Old Six's mind, Hellion, Vivian and Beligaju had already become monsters. He had never seen a person being followed by a group of monsters. If it wasn't for the fact that Old Six had experienced a lot of things and was vicious and merciless to a certain extent, if it were anyone else, they would have been scared speechless. Therefore, when a group of people came in with rifles, he cooperatively raised his hands and took a step forward, hiding behind the armed forces. His eyes were still filled with fear as he looked at Beligaju. He even grabbed the clothes of the armed forces leader and kept saying, "Save me, those monsters want to kill me. They want to kill me." At the same time, the armed forces who did not know what was going on immediately took a step forward and swept the area with their guns, protecting OL6. Old Six had achieved his goal because even if the enemy was very strong, there were people sent by the higher-ups to block him. Moreover, as long as he was caught, he would be secretly protected. These people wanted to investigate him, but they wouldn't be able to find anything. As for that monster, he didn't believe that the monster would dare to cast a spell in front of the armed forces. Therefore, the armed forces' arrival wasn't to catch him but to protect him. Old Six thought that no matter what, the enemy was still too inexperienced. They didn't know the twists and turns inside out and thought that he could be killed so easily. He had been in this line of work for so many years. Something could happen, it would have happened long ago. Since they were safe until now, it proved that they had someone backing them. In China, having someone was more useful than having anything. The living could become dead and the dead could become alive. For the readers, it's too sleepy. Moi, good night, continue tomorrow. Chapter 909. As long as he didn't admit to anything, the people behind him would protect him. In the end, the one who would suffer would not be him but the other party's people. Sixth brother never doubted this. What he was afraid of was Beligaju himself. Fortunately, this group of people rushed in. Otherwise, he would have peed his pants. Hellion Vivian also knew that with such a big thing happening, there was no doubt that they would all be taken away. She had been waiting for this moment. Before boarding the train, she anonymously reported the situation on the train to the relevant authorities. However, it was obvious that it didn't have any effect. These human traffickers still did what they were supposed to do. This made Hellion Vivian realize that if there wasn't a major incident, there wouldn't be any impact. They boarded the train to create something that could attract attention in the restaurant's carriage. However, before they had the time to do so, His Highness arrived in his private jet and parked it on the roof of the train. This was simply advertising for the train. In this way, it would be difficult for the higher-ups not to notice. This was the effect that Hellion Vivian wanted. Because some things had to wait until the fire could no longer be contained before all the people who should be taken down would be taken down. Therefore, when someone rushed in, Hellion Vivian took the lead and raised her arms. She even held His Highness' hand with one of her hands and made him raise it with her. Don't blame Wei Wei for thinking too much. His Highness would really kill all the people who came in regardless of whether they were good or bad people. His Highness was very satisfied that Hellion Vivian took the initiative to hold his hand. The corners of his mouth curled up as he tilted his head and glanced at Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian continued to raise His Highness' hand and stared at it. Little Shangxie and Qingchen took a second look and followed Hellion Vivian's example. They raised both of their little hands. The two little ones were not very tall. After all, they were only 3 years old. They looked even cuter when they raised their hands. However, little Shangxi's face was too cool. When he looked at those people, he didn't look like he was surrendering. Instead, he looked like he was evaluating whether the food was delicious. Beligaju was too familiar with that kind of gaze. He turned his head and gave Bailey Shangxi a warning look. I've told you about the dining etiquette. It seems that you've forgotten it because of the train journey today. What dining etiquette? Qingchen was very curious. Her two little hands were still in the air as she turned her little head to ask. Bailey Jiaju glanced at his youngest son, whom he had never met before, and said in a leisurely manner, "You can't eat anything that's been soaked in soil or sweating. You'll be the same in the future." This sentence actually sounded very normal. But if the food being eaten was a human, then Qingchen began to feel conflicted. She silently looked at the roof of the car. The person who broke in didn't seem to expect to see two children in this place. First he was stunned. Then he heard them talking about food. He frowned and pressed the earpiece. Reporting, there are 2 children in the car. No, it's not just 2 children. There are more children in the sleeping compartment. The Special Forces soldier who spoke was already stunned. This was because he had never seen so many children in a car before. Every one of them was still in the same posture as before. This was because their training taught them to be calm no matter what situation they were in. However, they felt an unprecedented shock in their hearts. One question after another was thrown out. Why were there so many children in this car? Moreover, these children were not very old. The youngest was only 2 years old. Although they were not injured, they looked very afraid of strangers. Each of them was extremely thin. Where did so many children come from? Why were they locked in the same car? Every man had guts, especially those who were protecting their country. Captain, this is not normal. The leading Special Forces soldier didn't speak. Instead, he pressed the intercom. There are too many children in the car. The preliminary suspicion is that it is human trafficking. Take them back first and let the local police investigate. You are only responsible for solving the problem on the train. Don't interfere in other things. The leading Special Forces soldier's fingers paused. Seeing that he didn't speak, someone became anxious. Captain, obey the order. The leading man said as he pulled out the earpiece. He said in a calm voice, protect the children. Yes. The Special Forces soldiers were very fast and resolute. They cleaned up the scene in less than 5 minutes. As Hellion Vivian expected, they were all taken back to Yunqing for interrogation. Hellion Vivian's statement was very clear. Every sentence pointed out that Sixth Brother's crime was unforgivable. This day was destined to be a restless one. At nearly 4 o'clock in the morning, Lu Hongjiang, a big shot, was still sleeping in the hotel with his wife. A phone call told him that a plane had landed on the green train from Yunqing to North Tibet. Now someone had gone to deal with it. All the follow-up work would be handed over to him. Lu Hongjiang was completely awake. Brother, what's the matter? Why are you in such a hurry? Lu Hongjiang didn't even speak. He pulled down the woman's white arm and left with the leather bag. After arriving at the office, his heart was still burning with anxiety. He made a few calls to his subordinates and also made a call to his superiors to inquire about the situation. Every time something went wrong, that person would help him, and this time was no exception. However, it was inevitable that he was a little unhappy. How many times have I told you? Now the investigation is very tight. Don't let them get ahead of the wind. Well, let's not talk about the past. I heard that there was a group of people on the train. Since you are in the local police station and Sixth Brother is involved, lead the public opinion to the private plane. Don't let the abductions spread. Then everything will be easy to solve. You know what to do. That superior hung up the phone after saying that. In Yunqing, Lu Hongjiang was indeed in charge. But in the whole Yun district, that superior had connections, so it would be more convenient for him to do things. Unlike Lu Hongjiang, that superior didn't collude with anyone in Li City. Instead, everyone was familiar with each other, so he turned a blind eye to some things. Even if something went wrong, he could solve it perfectly. So Lu Hongjiang believed in his solution. After all, he was transferred from the capital and knew how to shift the foundation of the incident. With that superior's advice, Lu Hongjiang was no longer so anxious. Instead, he slowly calmed down. This was the advantage of being in this position. He could turn big things into small ones and small ones into nothing. Chapter 9-10. At 6 o'clock, the sun rose and the morning came. Several cars were speeding on the highway, heading towards the toll station in Yun City from northern Tibet. Boss, what's going on over there? Monkey's voice came from the headset. Hellion Vivian was still sitting in the car that was escorting them to the inspection station. She avoided the sight of the people in front of her and knocked on the headset twice. She couldn't speak. But there was one thing. The small camera installed in her hair had always been there. It was just that they were also on the train, so it wasn't easy to turn it on. Now it was different. She gave this instruction, which meant that she wanted Monkey to turn on the camera and start recording. After Monkey heard the sound, he quickly took out his notebook and entered a bunch of codes. Then an image popped up on the screen. He was familiar with the image. It was because he was familiar with it that the smile on his face suddenly turned cold. Jean, boss, and the others have been caught. We have to erase the records on the train. This isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is the ornaments on Elle's body. If a professional is here, they will definitely find it suspicious. Jean took a sip of wine and looked back at old A, who was still playing with the children. The corners of his mouth curled up. But that will have to wait until we go to the top to find someone who understands. The local people won't be able to see the use of those ornaments. As long as boss and the others can come out before that, it will be fine. Olde, stop telling these children how powerful little boss is. We have to start moving too. First, how about we disguise ourselves and send some gifts to their families? Nothing else, just a photo will do. It's 6 o'clock in the morning now. They will have breakfast in half an hour. This is the best time to look at photos. Old A took off the plush toy on his head and put the 3 children down one by one. Then he said, then we'll disguise ourselves as a courier and buy a second-hand motorcycle. I'll throw it away directly after that and then meet up with you. Oh right. Jean stood up and smiled evilly. Boss seems to have said that. Monkey, when it's appropriate, you can directly broadcast what boss's camera captured on the internet using a virtual IP. Don't be found out. No problem. Monkey typed on the keyboard with one hand and made an OK gesture with the other hand. Take action. The last 2 words were spoken by Hellion Vivian through her headphones. Even though she didn't say anything, the long-time tacit understanding allowed everyone to receive the message in an instant. This also included Suit Man S and Young Man L. Al had the most accessories on his body, but he was extremely secretive. If one wasn't a real expert, they wouldn't be able to tell that those little things would combine into a small pistol. This was something only a mechanical genius like L could do. The Special Forces soldiers who escorted them had been paying attention to the children. They didn't say anything, but they were waiting for a reasonable explanation. They knew that there were always some things that they couldn't let everyone know in order to avoid causing panic. But this time was different. They had fought floods and saved fires. In order to resist the invaders, they did not hesitate to sacrifice themselves. It was all for the sake of making this country better and more peaceful. And this time, there was clearly something wrong with the mission because the appearance of these children was not part of their mission. There were so many children. How did they get on the train? If no one was involved, no matter how powerful the person was, it would be impossible to bring so many children onto the train at once. What about the ticket inspection? What about the patrol on the train? Didn't they find anything? The Special Forces soldiers were engrossed in their thoughts. No one spoke. At this time the car just stopped. As soon as the door opened, Lu Hongjiang came over. He had been waiting at the door early in the morning. Because of the plane, many people on the internet were paying attention to the follow-up of this matter. He had to leave a good impression in the hearts of his peers or the media. He deliberately didn't wash up to make himself look a little travel-worn. He reached out and shook the captain of the team. Thank you for your hard work. It's really hard. Well, since we have arrived in Yunqing, you can go and rest. The work of cleaning up will be done by us. There are still a group of children on the train. The captain just opened his mouth. Lu Hongjiang interrupted him. There are still many people here. It's better to sort out some information and investigate before we talk about it. They did have a principle of confidentiality about the mission. In addition, they didn't know why there were so many problems. Moreover, this kind of thing was not within their scope of responsibility, so it was difficult for them to say anything. They were worried that making groundless accusations would cause bad influence. Lu Hongjiang grasped this point. As long as this matter was digested internally, there wouldn't be any influence. It would become an ordinary case. Moreover, he would be the one to decide the outcome of the cleanup work. As long as he controlled this matter well, he would be the one to decide. Lu Hongjiang was quite confident. To him, only these Special Forces soldiers couldn't be controlled. However, the iron discipline of soldiers didn't allow them to say anything to the outside world. It had to be said that Lu Hongjiang's calculations were very good. He was very meticulous in his work and was very good at putting on a show. His eyes were bloodshot, but he still insisted on working. He wanted to personally interrogate who was causing trouble on the train. The word causing trouble was used very subtly. Lu Hongjiang's words were equivalent to deciding the nature of this case. He didn't mention the child trafficking at all. He directly led the topic to the matter of the plane stopping on top of the train. He didn't let Sixth Brother go because he knew that it would be easy for others to talk about him if he let Sixth Brother go at this time. Instead, he directly convicted Sixth Brother of participating in the fight on the train. On the surface, he was handling it impartially, but in reality, when comparing large-scale child trafficking, gun carrying, and causing trouble, it was obvious which crime was more serious. The former could directly make Sixth Brother lose his head, while the latter could at most lock Sixth Brother up and let him out very quickly. After doing all this preparatory work, he started the real interrogation. In other words, he didn't interrogate Sixth Brother at all. He directly skipped over him and took the prepared statement in his hands. He was going to interrogate Hellion Vivian and the others. After all, for Lu Hongjiang, the sooner the train incident came to a conclusion, the better. The higher-ups were still waiting for news. If it took too long, it wouldn't be good for him. The first person Lu Hongjiang interrogated was Elle. He originally thought that since Elle was relatively young, it would be easier to get information out of him. However, no matter what he asked, Elle didn't even lift his head after 20 minutes had passed since he came in. Chapter 9:11. If he hadn't glanced at him from time to time, Lu Hongjiang would have suspected that he didn't hear him at all. However, he didn't give any response even after hearing it. The perfect silence made Lu Hongjiang take a deep breath. He turned and walked to the second interrogation room. He didn't believe that none of them would lose control and speak. This time, Suit Man S was in the interrogation room that Lu Hongjiang pushed open. Based on Lu Hongjiang's observation of people, the brighter the clothes, the easier it was for him to find out something. Sure enough, as soon as Lu Hongjiang entered the room, S opened her mouth to speak. However, what he said was, "I want to contact my lawyer." Not many people in the mainland could afford a private lawyer, and even fewer people understood the meaning of a private lawyer's existence. If there was a lawyer, anything could be solved by a lawyer. As long as there was no absolute evidence to link the interrogator to the incident, the interrogator had the right to remain silent. Lu Hongjiang felt that it was troublesome to meet such a person, so he decided to take the initiative. "We'll help you contact a lawyer, but you have to tell me why you were on the train." "Of course we were on the train," S replied with a faint smile. At first, Lu Hongjiang thought that this person with a loose mouth might be helpful in his plan. After chatting for 15 minutes, Lu Hongjiang realized that he was just toying with him. He couldn't use him at all. Lu Hongjiang even suspected that the other party had undergone professional training in interrogations. The seemingly random answers were, in fact, carefully thought through each and every one of them. For example, the answer he gave earlier. It was as if they were on the train just because they were on the train. This made Lu Hongjiang's face turn livid. He almost couldn't control his temper. "Okay, stop talking." Suit Man S was obedient. He really shut his mouth when the other party asked him to stop talking. He looked at Lu Hongjiang with a frivolous expression. Lu Hongjiang was frustrated that he couldn't get the slightest clue from two people in a row. Even if he had the ability to hide the truth, he still needed a confession to close the case. If it really didn't work out, he would use some means to extort a confession. However, now was definitely not the time. There were still many people outside, and he had to make himself as gentle as possible. After all, Lu Hongjiang was someone who was familiar with this process and knew how to weigh the pros and cons. He planned to ask one more question. If he still couldn't get anything out of them, then he would have to see how tough these people were. With this thought in mind, Lu Hongjiang pushed open the door of the interrogation room where Hellion Vivian was being held. The two of them sat face to face. He thought that when faced with such a situation, women would always lose their cool. Once a person lost their cool, they would make many mistakes. Even if it was reasonable, it was still the same. However, the other party's eyes were half closed as if she was resting. After he entered, a smile slowly appeared on her face. Her lazy appearance made it seem as if she had been waiting for him. "We didn't drive the plane there. Besides, didn't someone say in the newspaper that the plane stopped on top of the train because it ran out of fuel?" What he didn't expect was that the other party would actually use a public announcement to shut his mouth. Generally, the public announcement of news was to not create chaos. Did she think that he was a fool? Lu Hongjiang had been in this position for so many years and was used to being looked down upon. His temper was also very bad. It was not easy for him to endure until now. He sneered. "You and I both know why the plane landed on top of the train. Don't play dumb anymore. What kind of place is this? Do you still have room to lie?" "Oh." Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and smiled. "Why don't you explain to me why the plane landed on top of the train?" "Pa." Lu Hongjiang's hand suddenly slammed on the wooden table. "I'm the one interrogating you, not the one interrogating me. Your accomplice has already confessed. It's useless for you to be stubborn. It's better to be honest." "Well, since they've already confessed, then I'll confess too." Hellion Vivian lowered her eyes. She really looked like she was going to confess. In fact, this angle only allowed him to take a clearer picture of the other party's expression. Lu Hongjiang was still smug in his heart. "Me. With just a little scare you can get anything out of her. That plane really didn't belong to us. We had a small conflict with sixth brother on the train. If Lu Hongjiang used the word troublemaker well, Hellion Vivian used the word small conflict even more cleverly. Since the other party wanted to turn a big problem into a small one and a small one into nothing, then she would go along with the other party's wishes. Sure enough, Lu Hongjiang heard and nodded in satisfaction. However, what he didn't expect was that Hellion Vivian's next sentence was actually, "You should be very familiar with sixth brother, right?" Hellion Vivian asked very directly. "That sixth brother who traffics in human beings." Lu Hongjiang's expression changed and he smiled coldly. "What are you talking about? I don't understand at all. What sixth brother? You're slandering him. Just pretend that you don't know him. Then why didn't you ask where the children on the train came from? Why did you ask about the origin of our plane?" Hellion Vivian's every word hit the nail on the head. "I don't believe that no one told you that the entire carriage was filled with children under the age of 5. These children were starved and their minds were in a state of collapse. This is the core of this matter, not some plane. Of course, since you asked why the plane was parked on the roof of the car, then I will answer you again. The plane was indeed not driven by us. It was a father who was anxious to find his kidnapped son, so he sent a private jet to find him. I don't know if you are satisfied with this answer?" Lu Hongjiang's eyes darkened when he heard Hellion Vivian's words. He could see that this group of people wouldn't admit defeat. "You're really sharp-tongued. You did something wrong but you don't admit it. You're slandering people like us who want to solve the problem." Hellion Vivian smiled again. "Since you want to solve the problem, when are you going to convict sixth brother of his crime? Shouldn't large-scale human trafficking be sentenced to death?" Hearing this, Lu Hongjiang suddenly stood up and put his fingers on the table. He looked at Hellion Vivian coldly. "In this place, even the crime of human trafficking won't be sentenced to death. Moreover, there's a lot of suspicion in your confession. There's no truth in it at all." "Is that so?" Hellion Vivian suddenly smiled and said meaningfully, "I really hope that you'll have this attitude later." Chapter 9:12. At first, Lu Hongjiang didn't understand the meaning of Hellion Vivian's words. Instead, he felt that what she said was somewhat inexplicable. He came out of the interrogation room and planned to use other means to interrogate the next person, Beligaju. But before he could push open the door of the interrogation room, his private phone rang. The person on the other end of the phone was his wife. Her voice was extremely hoarse. "Old Lu, what should we do? Our Hung Hung is missing." "Missing? How is that possible?" Lu Hongjiang turned his head at once. "Have you looked for him in the garden? Did he go to play with the soil again? We've looked everywhere but there's still no one. The neighbors also said that they didn't see Hung Hung. Why do you think he disappeared when you woke up?" Hearing this, Lu Hongjiang's heart was overwhelmed. "Calm down first. How long has it been since Hung Hung disappeared?" "I don't know when he disappeared but I've been looking for him for 3 hours. I couldn't get through to you. Where have you been all night? Are you always so busy that you don't even have time to go home and take care of your child?" Lu Hongjiang didn't dare to tell his wife the truth. He slept in the hotel all night. He just rubbed his hair. "Okay, the most important thing now is to find Hung Hung. I'll deal with this matter. Think carefully. Is there anything you haven't found?" If it was an ordinary child who had been missing for so long, Lu Hongjiang would definitely think that the child had been abducted. But this was Yunqing where he had the final say. Sixth brother had been worshipping him every year. Who dared to abduct his son? Even if the sky collapsed, nothing would happen to his son. However, in the next moment, Lu Hongjiang's idea was slapped hard in the face. It was not because of anything else, but because when he was about to hang up the phone, a scream came from the other end. "Oh, what's wrong?" Lu Hongjiang asked quickly. The voice on the phone turned into crying, intermittent pain. "Old Lu, someone abducted Hung Hung." "That's impossible." Lu Hongjiang's voice was high. "Why not? The person who abducted your son sent a letter saying that it's because you've done all sorts of heartless things, allowing the local people to casually sell children and doing anything for profit. That's why they abducted Hung Hung. The other party also said that they want you to think of some children who have memories. What you did, they will do the same thing to Hung Hung." After reading that sentence, Lu Hongjiang's wife gripped the picture tightly and asked in a trembling voice, "Oh Lu, I don't understand. What will happen to the child when he has his memory?" When Lu Hongjiang heard the news, he felt an unprecedented chill. He knew very well how OL6 and the others treated goods. The more difficult it was to transport, the more trouble they would find it troublesome. In order to make the goods more obedient, those children who still had memories would directly make the children's limbs imperfect and then beg. Lu Hongjiang didn't understand. In the past he had seen a very normal scene, but now he didn't even dare to imagine that scene. Old Lu, say something, old Lu. On the other end of the phone, Lu Hongjiang's wife was completely anxious. For some reason she had a bad feeling about this. Lu Hongjiang's next sentence confirmed this. He said, "I'll go and investigate now. We'll talk about everything after this is over." After hanging up the phone, Lu Hongjiang had his people pull up all the surveillance cameras in the area around them. In the end, it was not easy to find a courier. In the end, he sent people over, but they found that the car had been casually abandoned by the roadside by the owner. This was obviously planned, and the other party's method was very good. They did not leave any trace, so even if the local people wanted to chase after them, they didn't know where to start. It had been almost 5 hours since Lu Hongheng disappeared. Now Lu Hongjiang really started to understand what Hellion Vivian meant by that sentence. His eyes shook and his fingers were tightly clenched. The anger in his heart made him kick open the door of the interrogation room. "The person who abducted Hongheng is you, right?" Lu Hongjiang looked at Hellion Vivian, and it was like he wanted to strangle her to death. "Where is Hongheng? Hand Hongheng over." Hellion Vivian leaned back and said indifferently, "It's just a child and you're so anxious? Just now, a carriage full of children was locked in the train bed, but you didn't seem to be anxious. I'll ask you one more time, where is our Hongheng?" Lu Hongjiang was clearly a little out of control. Hellion Vivian looked at him and said coldly, "Now you feel uncomfortable?" There were 661 cities on the mainland. Among them there were 4 municipalities, 283 prefecture-level cities, and 374 county-level cities. Just these cities alone, those parents who wanted to find their children would have to go to a city every day, and it would take them 2 years to go through the entire mainland. Not to mention there were 1,636 counties under these cities. By the time they finished going through all these places, how old would the children be? It would take them at least 7 years. Even their parents wouldn't know what these children would become in 7 years. If they were lucky, they might be able to find their children. If they were unlucky, they might never see their children again. All this is because someone is trafficking children. You know what kind of business Sixth Brother is in, but you turn a blind eye to it. As long as you get a lot of benefits, as long as no one finds out, as long as no one exposes these things, you will continue to condone it. I have something to ask you. If your child is abducted and sold, why are you still so black-hearted to get the money? Hearing this, Lu Hongjiang's eyes were extremely cold. Sure enough, it's your trick. What do you want? Do you want to be acquitted? Do you know whose territory Yunqing is? Do you want to play the hero here? Let me tell you, if you don't hand Hongheng over today, you can wait to be shot. That's strange. Didn't you just say that in the mainland, no matter how old the abductor is, he won't be sentenced to death? Why do you want to punish him severely now that it's your son's turn to be missing? Hellion Vivian chuckled and raised her eyebrows. Then she moved her fingers and gave a corresponding order to the Bluetooth headset. Lu Hongjiang was so angry that his face turned blue. He made up his mind to give her a heavy sentence. Anyway, he had the right to do so. As for Hongheng, he didn't believe that he couldn't find him. In Yunqing he had the final say. But the arrogant Lu Hongjiang didn't know that all his words and deeds were recorded on the computer, and now it was spreading to the whole internet at a fast speed. Chapter 9:13. We're just going to stay here? Not go anywhere. Bailey Shangxie spoke to his imperial father for the first time. His little face was expressionless the whole time. He crossed his arms in front of his chest, wore a punk leather jacket and had his own goggles on his hair again. He looked very cool. It's better to be with my younger brother than to be locked up with you. Baligaju glanced at his son who was standing beside him indifferently and said in a casual tone, "It's rare that we have the same opinion. But it's a pity that I'm now a father who desperately boarded the train to find his son, so you better be honest. Otherwise, why would I come all the way here to save you? You really listen to your mother." Bailey Shangxia's tone sounded very sarcastic. Bailey Jiaju slightly crossed his legs. That languid appearance was not like sitting in an interrogation room, but rather like drinking afternoon tea. His slender fingers tapped the side of his face. You can choose not to listen. You see if your imperial mother will still like you if you go out now. Bailey Shangxie. So you've been pretending from the beginning to the end. You're good at pretending in front of your mother. You don't have the usual murderous look. That's enough. The father and son had never seen eye to eye with each other. Now they were in the same interrogation room. The younger one stood coolly beside the older one. His blood-red eyes looked at Lu Hongjiang, who walked in through the door. A bloodthirsty smile appeared on his face. The food is here. Lu Hongjiang didn't realize what kind of father and son he was going to face next. He thought that this was the last person. No matter what, he had to pry open this person's mouth. This time, Lu Hongjiang didn't speak too harshly like the previous few times. This was because he also calculated in his heart. Someone who could fly a private jet into the country must have a certain economic foundation, different from the group of people who wanted to drag him down. Lu Hongjiang believed that the reason this person appeared on that train was probably because his son had been abducted. Thinking of this, Lu Hongjiang couldn't help but curse old Six in his heart. Why is he so bad at doing things? He had hinted before that when he caught those children he didn't want to touch anyone with a background. There would be a lot of trouble when the time came. Now that he had stirred up trouble, he had to clean it up. Sir, I know that what happened on the train had nothing to do with you, but you should have been in the train carriage at that time. Someone accused Helian Wei Wei and her group of people in the carriage of illegal possession of guns and attempted to rob the train. If your testimony is the same as what I understand, then you can go back soon. First of all, how many people did they hurt? Did they destroy all the weapons in their hands? In order to avoid arousing suspicion, Lu Hongjiang had never met Sixth Brother. If he had met Sixth Brother, he would not have asked Beligaju and his son this question. Before Beligaju could say anything, Bailey Shangxie spoke up with a brilliant, bloodthirsty smile. Is this considered a confession? Lu Hongjiang didn't expect to hear the word confession from a 3-year-old child. After being stunned for a moment, he looked at Bailey Shangxie and said, "Little kid, I'm handling a case and I'm asking your father. In the mainland, it's not illegal for a child to attack a police officer, right?" Little Shangxie didn't care about what Lu Hongjiang was saying. After he finished speaking, he glanced at his father. Bailey Jiaju leaned back and nodded. He looked at Lu Hongjiang with a smile that was not a smile. Lu Hongjiang didn't know why, but that smile made him feel a chill from the bottom of his heart. Why did this little boy ask such a question? Was this a question that a 3-year-old child would ask? Before Lu Hongjiang could react, his arm was twisted by a small, porcelain-like hand. The heart-wrenching pain made him fall to his knees. One of his knees landed heavily on the ground, and he raised his head to look at Bailey Shangxie, whom he had always thought was only 3 years old. From his angle, Bailey Shangxie's eyes were so red that they seemed to be glowing faintly. At this moment, the door of the interrogation room was suddenly opened, and someone rushed in. Bailey Shangxie let go of his hand. He looked regretful. Lu Hongjiang was furious. He swung his left hand and said in a high voice, "Catch this little brat for me." "Secretary, he's only a 3-year-old child. According to the rules, he can't be locked up." The person who rushed in said softly, "Why don't you interrogate the older one?" Lu Hongjiang gritted his teeth. The pain really existed in his body, but he couldn't do anything to the other party. This feeling was terrible. He saw that the other party had some money, so he wanted to give him face so that they could get along well in the future. Since the other party didn't buy it, then he shouldn't force him to do anything. Lu Hongjiang twisted his wrist and gave the person behind him a look. Then another person rushed in. Compared to the previous person, this person's expression obviously changed. He leaned over and whispered a few words in Lu Hongjiang's ear. Lu Hongjiang's expression changed. He no longer had the mood to interrogate. He strode out of the interrogation room and said, "Where's the computer? Give me the computer." The secretary beside him quickly handed him a tablet. His forehead was overflowing with cold sweat. It was obvious that he had seen something. Lu Hongjiang took the tablet and opened the web page. Not only was the sound very clear, even the image was very clear. His every word and every expression was recorded so that people could understand it clearly. Because of the problem with the platform, the reposts and comments were increasing at a crazy speed. Everyone was scolding him for having a beast heart. "I've never seen such a beast. His child is a treasure, but other people's child is grass? There must be an explanation. This kind of person actually stayed in a high position safely for so many years. A car full of children. How many parents' favorite children? In order to reduce human trafficking, we always remind the children to be careful not to eat food given by strangers, not to give directions to strangers, and not to talk to strangers. We take precautions and don't hesitate to wear down the children's innocence. We want to protect them, but in fact this is not enough. This is not the solution to the problem at all. I keep feeling that this matter is not so simple. Isn't this person too protective of the human traffickers? Is there some inside story? Ask for a technical analysis. Very soon a technical post appeared on Weibo. This was what Lu Hongjiang feared the most. Chapter 9:14. A certain technical post wasn't like a certain Weibo post that would only vent one's emotions. It would really analyze something and get the attention of the relevant personnel, especially an original video like this. After all, there was never a lack of people who were truly knowledgeable. Lu Hongjiang clicked on it with trembling hands and saw that someone registered under the name Tang Sect had sorted out all the relative questions in just 10 minutes. That's right, questions. He didn't say anything in an affirmative tone. Instead he sent 6 questions in a row. The name of the post was 6 Questions to Lu. 1. Why are you defending the human traffickers? 2. As a local bookkeeper, how did so many children get into the station? Have the ticket inspectors never wondered why so many children got on the train at the same time? 3. You made yourself travel-worn to the scene. It was indeed very tiring, but which mistress left the kiss mark on your neck? 4. This is clearly a child trafficking case. Why are you defining it as a simple fight? 5. Previously the data was released. There were 5 main people involved in this case. In other words, you brought 5 people for interrogation. Can you explain why you skipped the main culprit of the child trafficking case, Wu Lu, and kept interrogating the other 4 innocent people who came to look for children? 6. What is your relationship with Wu Lu, the main culprit of this child trafficking case? Also, in our country not all human traffickers are shot. Article 240 of the criminal law stipulates that those who abduct and sell children in particularly serious circumstances are sentenced to death and confiscation of property. It seemed that Lu Hongjiang should flip through the law book again. As soon as this analysis post was posted, it was instantly forwarded by all the big names on the internet. The internet exploded. In reality, Lu Hongjiang raised the tablet in his hand and threw it on the ground. Find a way to delete all these posts. His secretary followed him and wiped his sweat. We've already informed the relevant departments to delete them, but we can't always do this. Soon the higher-ups will find out. Moreover, no matter how much we delete, countless posts will appear in a few seconds. We can only prevent this topic from appearing on a certain popular blog, but it's impossible to make it completely disappear. Fortunately, it hasn't fermented yet. As long as you personally explain the origin of the video to the media, there might be a chance to remedy it. Just do as you say. Lu Hongjiang calmed down. Think of a way to make another topic. As long as this topic doesn't become a hot topic, everything will be fine. We'll hold a press conference now. I want to use the traces left on the train to tell everyone that there was indeed a fight on the train. Furthermore, I've never defended the human traffickers. I'm also one of the parents who was persecuted by the human traffickers. My Hung is also missing. We're on the same side as everyone, which is why we interrogated the suspect. The secretary quickly wrote down a few key points and asked, "You mean to let that woman take over the job? There has to be an explanation for such a big thing. This woman is very cunning. She even installed a camera. From now on I won't interrogate her. Keep an eye on the internet. Don't let that post become popular." Yes. The secretary was confident that she could do it. After all, it was a sensitive issue and could be controlled for a period of time. Regardless of whether it was Lu Hongjiang or the secretary following behind him, they all placed their attention on Helian Weiwei. They even placed a jammer in the place where she was locked up, causing intermittent static to appear in her earphones. However, they didn't know that in fact the most ruthless person wasn't Vivian, but a certain highness sitting in another interrogation room. Baligaju was still sitting on the chair with his legs crossed. When he looked up at the camera, there was a crackling sound. Without the camera, countless thick black fog surged out behind him. The The black fog hid demons that mortals couldn't see at all. A black shadow appeared in midair and knelt on the ground. Master, that human surnamed Lu seems to be very afraid that the video shot by the Princess Consort will be pushed to the top of the news. Now that he has gone to hold a press conference, should we stop him? No need. Bailey Jiajua's mouth was obviously smiling, but his eyes were very cold. If we stop him, how can we play? He raised 1 million to buy a hot topic. Of course, the video shot by the Princess Consort should be seen by more people. Since he wants to hold a press conference to let more people know how dirty he is, let's help this human. With that, Bailey Jiajua stood up, tied his suit jacket with one hand, and walked towards the door of the interrogation room. The door was originally locked, but when he walked in, the lock was instantly twisted into a different shape. The door opened at the sound. Bailey Jiaju's silvery hair shone with a watery luster under the sunlight. In the face of such a man, many death guards didn't dare to appear. Time seemed to stop in the world. Those people walking in the corridor maintained their original movements, as if they didn't even move. Baligaju walked past them so elegantly. The whole corridor seemed to be echoing with the exclusive Sanskrit sound of the devil. Bailey Shangxia followed behind him, his eyes brighter than ever. The two death guards who were wandering here all hid, squatted in the corner, and stretched their necks to look in this direction. Why are this father and son here? Or did they come out of the interrogation room? Shu, lower your voice. The big devil might not bother to smash the door, but the little devil might not. Us messengers are like Barbie dolls in his hands, and the kind that can be trampled on very easily. So don't talk, be quiet. Death guards. You asked me to be quiet, why do you have to be so loud? The little devil is already standing behind you, okay? You idiot. Two death guards. Bailey Shangxia glanced at them coolly, reached out his small hand and poked their heads. I don't like to play with death guards recently. Reapers. Thank the heavens you've finally corrected that inhumane hobby of yours. But my younger brother will definitely like it, he hasn't played with it yet. Bailey Shangxia said very seriously, catch them first, I'll let my younger brother play with them later. Death guards. When did you have a younger brother? This is not normal. One little devil is not enough, do you want a second one? Oh no. Bailey Shangxia was very qualified as an older brother, he always thought of little Qingchen. With a tug of his small hand, he dragged the two death guards and caught up with his father's pace again. Chapter 9:15. Baligaju glanced sideways at his son and said faintly, You're already so old, yet you're still playing with such childish things. The Reapers. Childish? Did the great devil use such a word to describe them? They were Reapers, imperial envoys to catch ghosts. They were mighty and domineering. Bailey Shangxia was very cool. I caught them for my younger brother to play with. Hearing that it was for Qingchen, Baligaju did not say much. For the little devils, Reapers were indeed more practical toys. At the very least they could not be killed. The Reapers who had peeked into the great devil's thoughts were about to cry. So this was the reason why they had been favored by the little devil for so long. It was because they could not die. This was too much of a bully. They had always thought that the little devil valued them so much because of their beauty. Bailey Shangxia saw that the two Reapers' faces had darkened. He stretched out his small hand and poked their heads, ordering, My younger brother doesn't like it. Both of you laugh. The Reapers immediately forced themselves to laugh like flowers. Their teeth were piercing and their faces were ashen. It was very funny. Bailey Shangxia bent down and observed them. His voice was very domineering. You guys should maintain your original appearance. Don't laugh. It's too ugly when you laugh. You'll scare my younger brother. The Reapers were really about to vomit blood. They regretted coming to this place to catch dead spirits. Ooh, they really wanted to go back to the underworld. Although His Highness Little King of Hell was also very vicious, His Highness Little King of Hell was a wife lover. His lifelong wish was to chase after his wife. He did not have extra time to mess with them. But the little devil was different. He really played with them like Barbie dolls. Why was life so difficult? Along the way, Bailey Shangxia dragged the two Reapers, which played a very good role in opening the way. When they reached the press conference, everyone felt an unknown cold wind. The hall, which was originally quite warm, suddenly became cold for no reason. Just as the reporters were about to stand up and get a cup of hot water, they saw Lu Hongjiang and his secretary walking over. Everyone has been waiting for a long time, right? Lu Hongjiang's expression was still the same as before. He sighed elegantly and said, "Let's start the questioning." Of course, the reporters would not let go of this opportunity. After all, these were reporters who had been in contact with Lu Hongjiang before. When they asked questions, they were basically on Lu Hongjiang's side. "What do you think of the posts on the internet? It's inevitable that the people above us will encounter such problems. Malicious speculation will only make me more strict with myself. In fact, from the beginning I defined this case as a human trafficking case, but I didn't catch anyone doing the transaction at the scene. Because of the lack of evidence, in order to avoid alerting the enemy, I interrogated the suspect from the side." Lu Hongjiang's explanation was just to fill in the blanks. The reporters didn't seem to notice it. They followed Lu Hongjiang's words and asked, "You mean that the real human trafficker is the female prisoner you interrogated?" "Yes." Lu Hongjiang's eyes looked at the camera. He deliberately chose a live broadcast in order to regain control of public opinion. Most people on the internet don't know the truth of the matter. Just based on a small video they think that something has happened to me. In fact, my child is really lost. When I was fighting with these lawless human traffickers, I was already prepared in my heart. I just didn't expect that the revenge would come so quickly. In order to make me compromise, they directly abducted my son and wanted to use the internet to confuse the public. I'm also a victim. I lost my son. I am more anxious than anyone else, but I know that if I want to bring all of them to justice, I have to endure the pain and continue to interrogate them. This is the answer I give to everyone." Lu Hongjiang's words were very moving. Some of the audience sitting in front of the TV screen couldn't help but wonder if they were wrong. Perhaps they misunderstood Lu Hongjiang. After all, this bookmaker's reputation had always been very good. Now, in order to investigate the human traffickers, he suffered such revenge. Not only did he lose his son, but his reputation was about to be tarnished. Fortunately, they learned the truth of the matter in time. Otherwise, wouldn't they have lost a good bookmaker who could make decisions for the people? Some netizens began to relax and began to type and leave messages. "These human traffickers are too cunning." At this time, the Internet Water Army hired by the secretary also played a certain role. They began to clear Lu Hongjiang's name. He is a native of Yunqing. People who know Lu Shuji know that he is very approachable. Everything he does is for the sake of Yunqing. I really didn't expect that this time, in order to fight against evil, he would be slandered like this. We should be rational. Especially at this time, the more we can't be instigated by others. Believe in the bookmaker. He will give us a satisfactory answer. As soon as this matter came out, I knew that someone deliberately poured dirty water on the bookmaker in order to get away with the crime. The bookmaker's style has always been strict and he loves his wife. He won't have a close relationship with anyone at all. But what is worth doubting is why there is a camera in the interrogation room. This is simply a plot designed by the human traffickers long ago. More and more interview scenes were played at the same time during the live broadcast. The reporters turned the microphones to Lu Hongjiang again, and said with sincerity, "We've really wronged the bookmaker. There's nothing to be wronged about. Now I just want to find my son and bring the real human traffickers to justice. No one knows how cruel they will be to my son." Lu Hongjiang said as he turned his head and closed his eyes tiredly, as if he was trying to bear the pain of losing his son. It had to be said that his acting was very good. No one saw the ferocious look on his face when he turned his face. He wanted to drag him down with a video? He was really whimsical. When the press conference was over, it would be the time of death for that woman. Lu Hongjiang was acting complacently, but he didn't see that at the end of the crowd, Baligaju raised the corner of his mouth. That kind of smile indicated that the game had just begun. The secretary still stood aside and cooperated with Lu Hongjiang. Because of this case, the bookmaker has not closed his eyes for a day and a night. Now he needs to rest for a while. If there are no more questions for the reporters, clatter. Before the secretary finished her words, there was a burst of white on the big screen in the hall. "Hello? There's no sound from the microphones. What's going on?" The secretary looked at the person controlling the equipment. Those people didn't know what was going on. Their equipment was still intact, but they didn't make a sound. After a second of pause, the screen finally showed a new image. The secretary was about to smile and continue what she had just said when she realized that the video on the screen had completely changed. Chapter 9:16. In the live broadcast there was a private room surrounded by smoke. There were both men and women in the room. The women were wearing very revealing clothes and were behaving very flirtatiously. It was obvious what kind of place this was. When Lu Hongjiang saw the private room, his expression changed. Before the image became clear, he roared behind him, "Close it. Close all of these things for me." The staff member controlling the video heard Lu Hongjiang's order and started to press the stop button, but it was useless. The image continued to play and became clearer. It even showed the face of one of the men in the room. That man's appearance was too familiar. If it wasn't Lu Hongjiang, who else could it be? He was even wearing his favorite suit. He was hugging a busty woman in his arms and kissing the woman's face carelessly. He must have drunk a lot because his face was still rosy. His hands were still touching the woman's body. His eyes were half closed and he was lustful. Whatever elegance he had was all gone. He was extremely ugly. God. The reporters present couldn't help but let out a cry of surprise. After they reacted, they started to take pictures of Lu Hongjiang. Although they were indeed invited by Lu Hongjiang and usually helped Lu Hongjiang to guide public opinion, this time it was big news. Now whoever could take pictures of Lu Hongjiang's reaction would get ratings and an absolute headline. Lu Hongjiang's face was extremely pale. He even strode to the control panel and reached out to press all the switches, but it was useless. It was still useless. Not only was it useless, but there was even sound in the image. It was the sound of him talking to Old Sixth. It was also the sound of him talking to Old Sixth on the night of the train departure. He specially instructed Old Sixth, "The higher-ups are very strict now. It's not like before. Be careful and give those children more medicine so that they can be transported out." That was his voice. He couldn't deny it even if he wanted to. This time Lu Hongjiang was completely flustered. His palms were full of sweat. He reached out and pulled the secretary over. "What's going on? What's going on? Who touched the things here?" I don't know either. Usually the secretary is closely related to the laptop. When the secretary saw the video, she was no less shocked than Lu Hongjiang. Scandal. This was the first reaction. With this video as a comparison, what Lu Hongjiang said just now was like shit. No matter how she thought about it, it was disgusting. Lu Hongjiang was like a headless fly. He didn't care if the reporters were still at the scene. He took out his phone and randomly dialed a string of numbers. "Hurry up and stop the live broadcast. Shuji Lu, it's not that I don't want to help you, but the right to broadcast for half an hour after you was bought by someone else. I'm a qualified media person. As long as there are no clear instructions, I'll broadcast for whoever pays the money. Business is business." When Lu Hongjiang heard the reply, he wished he could smash his phone on the spot. He never thought that someone would actually spend money to buy the broadcasting rights of the radio station. Who in the world had such great financial resources? Who was it that wanted to kill him? Weren't those people locked up? And this video? How did they get their hands on it? Since there was such a video, why didn't they release it at the start? Why did they have to wait until he held a press conference? Too ruthless. The other party was too ruthless. Was he trying to humiliate him in front of the entire nation? Or was he trying to make him lose his life? Lu Hongjiang felt a chill in his heart. He was really scared because the radio station wasn't like the internet. Once it was broadcasted, he was afraid that even that person wouldn't be able to save him. But when exactly was it, and what method did the other party use to understand and investigate so much about him? Of course, Lu Hongjiang didn't know that as early as when Bailey Shangxie was brought to Yun City, a certain highness had already grasped all these things in his hands. However, he had never been interested in human affairs. Lu Hongjiang's mistake was that he caught someone he shouldn't have. A certain highness principle of doing things had always been that those who provoked him would never have a chance to live. Baligaju was still very elegant. His beautiful eyes watched this scene with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. This made him look like a vampire aristocrat who walked out of a movie. It could be seen that the reason Lu Hongjiang became like this was all thanks to a certain highness. Bailey Shangxie didn't comment on Lu Hongjiang's fate. The person who arrested his mother and younger brother for interrogation deserved this fate. Humans were a dirty species from head to toe. They even wanted to put the blame on their mother in front of their father. They were simply stupid to the point of having no brains. The expressions of the father and son were simply in sync. The older one and the younger one curled their lips. After a bloodthirsty smile, They turned around and walked back to the interrogation room amidst the chaotic crowd. Unlike Baligaju, Bailey Shangxie was still dragging 2 reapers in his hands. He looked like a domineering person who didn't want anyone to approach him. It was as if they really just came out for a stroll, a reaper stroll. Reapers? Are we used for strolling? Is that so? The father and son walked without looking back. They didn't even have the intention to look back. Because of the impact caused by their appearance, a large number of reporters rushed in from all directions and blocked Lu Hongjiang's path. Lu Shuji, how do you explain what happened in the video? Who is the woman you were holding in your arms? She shouldn't be your wife, right? You are also a person with a son. Aren't you afraid of retribution for doing such a thing? This time not only the television station but also all the major networks were broadcasting it live. Everyone in the streets and alleys stopped. Some people were browsing certain blogs on their phones. Some people directly saw the big TV screen in the shopping mall and started discussing. Almost everyone exploded. Beast. This person surnamed Lu is a complete beast. I really don't dare to imagine that there would be someone so vicious to this extent. They are simply colluding with each other. They even want to push the blame on others. Such a person should be shot. We should have snatched his son long ago and let him taste the pain of losing a child. There must be an explanation. Is there no one to control him? Lu Hongjiang finally returned to his office with great difficulty. He still wanted to find his old connections to protect him. Chapter 9:17. A mother who had lost her son searched through more than 20 cities and finally found her child in Yunqing. However, because her act of saving the child affected the interests of some people, she lost her life in an unfinished community. She never expected that after she called the police, what awaited her was a death. Next to the unfinished community was the warehouse where the traffickers kept the children. The incident once again occupied the hot search of a certain Weibo in the form of text and text. Almost everyone was paying attention to its development. The evilness of the matter was raised to a higher level. This time not only Lu Hongjiang but also other people such as the local law enforcement officers, the management staff of the train station and so on would be held accountable. Perhaps when they did these things, they did not know the ultimate purpose. They just did Secretary Lu a favor. However, in fact, because of Secretary Lu's call, they allowed so many children to be taken on the train together without even asking. When there was a murder case, they did not conduct an in-depth investigation. It was simply dereliction of duty. Unlike trafficking, this was a living human life. In the mainland, as long as it was related to murder, it would receive absolute attention. When Lu Hongjiang saw this news, his whole person fell into the office chair dispiritedly. He knew that this time his official career was completely over. No one could save him anymore. He could only hope that his old boss could save his life. Public opinion may be controllable, but people's hearts would never be at peace. Yunqing had to give an explanation. They sent a team to take Lu Hongjiang directly from the office. However, it was obvious that this time people were not so easily fooled. The incident itself had angered the people of the country. The reason why Lu Hongjiang could be so lawless was because of the cooperation of other departments. This time they did not only want to see a scapegoat. They wanted to punish all of them. The anger from the heart had reached the point of uncontrollable. The higher-ups were also actively holding meetings to seriously investigate the incident in Yunqing. The people in charge of the relevant departments had arrived. They were afraid, but at the same time they felt that it was not a big deal. After all, they were not the main culprits. At most they would be transferred. Indeed, if this happened in the past, they would not be severely punished. After all, it was not easy to determine the exact responsibility. In addition, no one wanted their people to be arrested. Therefore, the person sitting at the top of the table did not say anything. He just sat there and listened to the people below. In the end, this matter is Lu Hongjiang's sole responsibility. The people from the other departments were also not clear about the situation, so they made all kinds of mistakes. Even if they were not clear about the situation, they were still actively cooperating. There is no need to arrest the others. If that is the case, it will only make those who do things against the country more arrogant. Compared to internal punishment, I think we should first arrest the main alliance that caused this matter. Now, not only is Lu Hongjiang's son in their hands, but they have also taken away the other children. This is clearly a threat to us first. This is a crime. Deputy Director Zhang is right. They dared to record a video and hack into our system in the interrogation room. It's clear that they don't take us seriously. Keeping such a person alive would be a threat to society. Yes, I also suggest that we punish these criminals first. He must be severely punished. If he didn't make an ugly face, wouldn't it be a complete mess in the future? Internal problems can be solved slowly. We have to give everyone an explanation. These criminals are different. They are simply lawless. That's right. Severe punishment. Severe punishment. When the person for discipline inspection heard that, he looked down indifferently. This person had a military background and was an old general. It was said that he had always had a bad temper when he was in the military, but ever since he became the person for discipline inspection, he did not lose his temper easily. He was always smiling at everyone, but anyone who had been in the military knew that this person was not to be trifled with. Unfortunately, none of these officials had ever been in the military. Are you done? The old general asked them with a smile. Those people thought that he agreed with their opinion and nodded, not forgetting to take a sip of tea. Unexpectedly, in the next second there was a loud bang. The old general casually smashed the teacup in his hand on Deputy Director Zhang's head. As a deputy director of the police station, you use this excuse to excuse yourself when something happens. Your mouth is full of bullshit. Deputy Director Zhang did not expect the other party to suddenly explode. He was completely at a loss. He reached out and covered his forehead. He stared blankly at the old general and stammered, What about you? Take him away right now. As for the criminal you keep talking about, I have been watching from the side since she carried out her first mission. Compared to her, you are a bunch of trash. When the United States invaded Huaxia, she was one of the defenders. As the old general spoke, the door creaked open. With a creak, the door to the conference room opened. A tall and slender figure walked out from the intersection of light and shadow. That person's gait was perfect. Probably because of long-term training, even his walk was pleasing to the eye. That person was wearing a navy blue military uniform. The workmanship of the uniform was very exquisite. It made his legs long and his back straight. The spurs on his leather high boots shone brightly. When the light shone on the military emblem on his shoulder, it gave off a faint glow as if to suppress all the glamour. He was indescribably handsome. At this moment he was tilting his head slightly. He raised his eyebrows slightly and lowered them again. Teacher, let me do the questioning myself. After all, I am one of the leaders. As he spoke, that person looked around and said with a smile, I heard that someone wants to denounce the Tang sect. Who is it? Come forward. How could anyone dare to step forward? Everyone's faces had turned extremely pale when they heard the words Tang sect. Not only did no one dare to step forward, but everyone held their breaths and did not even dare to move their hands. They did not expect that this operation was not led by an ordinary person with no background, nor was it led by the small organization they had encountered before. It was led by the Tang sect. In other words, this investigation was led by the Tang sect. Chapter 9:18. Young Master Tang did not only have a certain level of strength in the military. Just his background alone was enough to shut everyone up. The first time people heard of this name, he was only 8 years old. An incident once happened on 6th Avenue in New York. Nearly 7 ATMs were not controlled by anyone and kept spitting out money. This incident not only alarmed the higher-ups, but even the media made a shocking report at that time. Everyone was guessing who had the ability to hack into the United States defense. Must be a hacker group. However, when they found out, it was the Tang family that controlled the entire Chinatown. At that time, old Master Tang was holding a dragon-headed walking stick and sitting next to him was a little boy. That little boy was born autistic. Other than the Sudoku in the newspaper, he did not react to anything else. He did not cry or laugh. However, it was this child who was able to hack into many network defenses with a laptop. At the end of 1997, those who read the foreign news knew how much hype this incident had at that time. The boy was brought to the interrogation hall. Because he was too young, they did not immediately make a decision. That was because the Americans did not want to judge him. Instead, they wanted to fight for him. They could provide many superior conditions to this little boy. As long as the Tang family agreed to change the little boy's nationality to the United States, They would immediately let him enter the most cutting-edge technology department. Old Master Tang did not agree. As the biggest Chinese businessman, his strength in the United States was definitely not inferior to that in China. He only gave the Americans one sentence: the Tang family must become a Chinese soldier. That was right, a soldier. This person was born in the wealthiest family in Chinatown. Compared to his eldest brother and second brother, he did not look like he was born in the Tang family at all. As to put it bluntly, he was a fool. The Americans once used this to negotiate with Old Master Tang, saying that it was most suitable for such a child to be raised by them. After all, his life skills were basically zero. Other than computers, what else could this child do? However, there were so many people in the Tang family, but Old Master Tang valued this little grandson the most and wanted to send him back to China. Just like that, 10 years later, the Falcon Special Forces produced a young Master Tang who made the world tremble. Because of his presence, no one dared to enter the border for 3 years. It would be fine if such a person was only outstanding in the military. However, he also knew how to play politics. This caused the group of people to be on tenterhooks. To be precise, the border was just southwest of Cloud City, and that was Falcon's defensive zone. How could they dare to compete with this man who had suddenly appeared? Deputy Director Zhang's forehead was dripping with cold sweat. Young Master Tang just walked up to him and smiled. Deputy Director Zhang, right? Deputy Director Zhang straightened his back. After all, the other party was only one level higher than him. He did not need to be so humble. Perhaps the rumors were just rumors. It's me. He accepts bribes, likes to gamble, and is also involved with Myanmar. Young Master Tang's fingers moved and the gun in his palm was pointed directly at his forehead. That posture was very handsome and crisp. Do you know why Wei Wei took your child away? It's because of these unforgivable crimes. Now who else can continue to stand up? With a gun pointed at them like this, who would dare to stand up? Deputy Director Zhang was so scared that his legs gave out. Young Master Tang then put the gun back and said concisely, "Take them away. Not too many, not too few." The 3 related people, those who were lucky and still wanted to talk to the old general, were all secretly brought back. The old general was furious when he saw young Master Tang. "Bastard, how dare you pull out a gun in front of me? Didn't you see my military rank? Or didn't you see me?" Young Master Tang cooperated at this time. He took a step back with his left leg and then put his feet together in a standard military salute. "General, you are not wearing a military uniform today. You." The old general had a love-hate relationship with his favorite disciple. He pointed at him and said, "You're too high profile this time. How many times have I told you to keep a low profile when you're on a mission? Is the National Security Agency treating you badly? If they are not good to you, come back to me. You can do whatever you want here." Young Master Tang looked forward and saluted again. "General, I obey orders and follow orders." When the old general heard this, he wanted to slap the back of his head. When had this kid ever been so obedient? This was nonsense. "Fine, then don't come back. But did you really arrange this operation in advance? Why didn't I receive any news?" The old general raised an eyebrow. Young Master Tang smiled. "Wei Wei is too fast. She's already settled everything here before we even got the news. However, I still have to ask about the plane. You know that the Tang sect has limited funds and can't afford a private jet." When the old general heard this, he almost spat out the tea in his mouth. This brat is crying poor. He actually dares to come here and cry poor. After talking for 10 minutes, the old general chased him away. He was afraid that if his favorite disciple didn't leave, the good-tempered image that he tried so hard to maintain in front of others would be ruined. This brat can really anger people to death in minutes. However, the old general also told young Master Tang that even if he didn't come, these people would be severely punished. This time, the pressure not only came from the original mission, but also from the person who appeared on the train in a private jet. His background was not simple enough to compete with the Tang sect. After hearing this, young Master Tang put down the cigarette in his hand and smiled meaningfully. "It's time to meet." On the other side, the old general was confused. On the other side, Bailey Shangxia did not return to his original place. He dragged the 2 ghost messengers and walked to the interrogation room where Qingshan was being held. It was not difficult for the little demon to pass through the crowd. In addition, everyone was dealing with the discussions of the outside world, so no one was watching this side. Therefore, it was very easy for Bailey Shangxia to walk in. Qingshan was still sitting on the chair playing with something with her head lowered. When she saw the two ghost messengers behind Bailey Shangxie, she instantly sat up straight. I'm using someone else's laptop now, so I can't update. This is bad news. The good news is that there will be a new book after this book is finished. I hope you guys are still here. Then I used your tips to buy a cup of coffee. I've recovered and went to the shooting location. Thank you, girls. I'll let you guys enjoy reading the new book. I can't go back yet, so I can only fly on the 1st. Chapter 9:19. Messengers, why are you here? Little Qingshan wanted to get down from the chair, but the legs of the chair were too high. He could only turn his back and try his best to get down from the chair with the tip of his little foot. That little appearance was extremely adorable. Bailey Shangxie had always been a good older brother. Seeing that his younger brother could not get down, of course he would help. He raised his arms and swayed as he hugged Qingshan, who was only slightly shorter than him. He glanced sideways at the two messengers who did not dare to move. His voice was very cool. I brought them here for you to play with. They are very obedient and did not run around. The messengers' thoughts were very complicated at this moment. They had been looking for an opportunity to escape, but they really did not dare to move because the other party was too tight on the rope. However, seeing that this child looked like a little prince and had black eyes, he probably would not like to play with messengers. What kind of joke was this? Other than the little devil, which child would treat them as toys, and even give them to others as, are there only 2 messengers? 2 is too boring to play with. Wait a minute, is quantity the key? 2 is not enough? Then how many do you want to catch to play with you? Before the messengers could finish their inner thoughts, Qingshan walked over with small steps. She bent down and poked their heads. She gave a serious evaluation. They are not very good looking. The messengers. This was completely different from what they had expected. Okay. Why did this seemingly gentle child have such a heavy taste? Also, could it be that they were not good looking enough? Every time humans saw them, they would be moved to tears. These 2 are indeed a little ugly. Next time I will catch them. Bailey Shangxia's small face had always been very cool. He stretched out his hands and grabbed the 2 messengers. He was very strong. As long as he moved, the rope would tighten. This time the messengers were completely obedient. Originally they were hoping that when they saw a human child they would let them go. Now, Qingshan was dragging a reaper with each hand. The strength in her small hands was no less than that of Bailey Shangxia. Bailey Shangxia obviously did not care how Qingshan played, but he had to help the little one roll up her sleeves. After everything was arranged properly, he lowered his little face and said, "Let's go find Imperial Mother." Can we go out now? Qingshan knew how to deal with the aftermath. Bailey Shangxia had always been domineering. Sure. There were very few people outside, only 2. I knocked them out. Qingshan originally wanted to raise a little demon, but she didn't expect that the little demon would turn out to be her big brother. However, her big brother was very good at doing things. As long as she followed her big brother, she would never have to worry about anything. The 2 little people, the big one holding the small one, the other 2 small hands dragging a ghost servant. Wherever they went, hundreds of ghosts would make way. No one dared to approach them. Except for young Master Tang, who was walking towards them. He was still wearing his military uniform. Looking at the 2 unconscious police officers at his feet, he tilted his head and lit a cigarette. He looked at the 2 little people in front of him with a smile. His gaze fell on Bailey Shangxia's scarlet eyes and he raised his eyebrows. The first to react was Bailey Shangxia. Instead it was the 2 ghost servants hiding behind them. They looked at young Master Tang in disbelief. Was this really a human? Why was the smell of blood on his body so strong? But he was indeed immortal. After killing so many people, he could still maintain his righteous aura and was impervious to evil. This kind of person was usually more terrifying than demons. Had humans become so terrifying? Sensing the trembling of the reapers, Bailey Shangxia raised his head and glanced at young Master Tang. His gaze was deep and serene. Then, as if he did not see young Master Tang, he continued to hold Qingshan's hand and walked forward. Young Master Tang smiled playfully. Then he flicked the cigarette in his hand and followed behind the 2 little people. When the door of the interrogation room was opened, Hellion Vivian saw this scene. Apart from her 2 precious sons, there was also a bright young Master Tang. Hellion Vivian was not surprised that young Master Tang would appear. After all, in a sense, Hellion Vivian was the one who told young Master Tang to deal with the aftermath. This was one of the procedures that had to be done after every mission. However, Hellion Vivian did not expect that young Master Tang would come with the two little ones. What was going on? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows at young Master Tang. Young Master Tang held a cigarette between his fingers and said with a smile that was not a smile, "I only heard that you have one son. What's the matter with the other one?" Hellion Vivian was very calm. She reached out and hugged Bailey Shangxie and Hellion Qingchen. "They're both mine." Red eyes, white skin. Young Master Tang put out the cigarette in his hand and casually found a chair to sit down. He crossed his legs and asked, "Vampire?" Bailey Shangxie replied coolly, "It's the devil." Young Master Tang nodded and said with a smile, Wei, so the man you slept with is a demon. Why did he fly a plane to find you with such fanfare? Is he dissatisfied with your skills?" Hellion Vivian. She suddenly felt that the words of those rough men were much calmer. Compared to young Master Tang, everyone was very cute. Bailey Shangxie turned to look at Qingchen. There was understanding in his eyes. It turned out that they all described their father as a man who was slept with by their mother. Qingchen held her forehead with her small hand as if she had a headache. She turned her face and whispered in Bailey Shangxie's ear, "Beauty Wei has always been positioning herself as a domineering president. Do you know what a domineering president is?" Bailey Shangxie nodded. He was also a child who had watched brainless dramas. When he thought of his father, he knew why his mother had such an illusion. In short, it was because his father was too shameless. However, Bailey Shangxie sized up young Master Tang. Who was this person? He seemed to be very familiar with his mother. If his father knew that his mother was very familiar with someone, the result wouldn't be good. But according to his father's personality, he would never do anything that would make his mother hate him. Moreover, this human looked different from normal humans. He seemed very smart and shouldn't be easy to deal with. Of course, young Master Tang noticed that Bailey Shangxie was sizing him up. But what really made him look up was Beligaju, who was walking behind Bailey Shangxie. Two equally outstanding men, but they were of different types. With just a glance, Beligaju roughly knew who this person was. He used to care a lot about this man. Even now he still felt that this man was very annoying. However, a certain prince was two-faced. He didn't show any emotions. He didn't even look at young Master Tang when they brushed past each other. Instead, he directly hugged Hellion Vivian's waist and kissed her forehead. He smiled and said, "The matter is settled. Let's go." Chapter 920. He used to care a lot about this man, and even now he still felt that this man was an eyesore. However, His Highness was two-faced and he didn't show any emotions. He didn't even look at young Master Tang when they brushed past each other. Instead, he put his arm around Hellion Vivian's waist and kissed her forehead. He smiled and said, "It's done. Let's go." Hellion Vivian felt that His Highness was too gentle. Was it because they hadn't seen each other for a long time? Hellion Wei nodded her head with a belly full of doubts, but she was actually obedient. After all, young Master Tang was here, which meant that the follow-up work was done. She believed that the information she collected was enough to bring some people to the surface, and young Master Tang was best at grabbing onto a thread and dragging everyone out. No one could guarantee that the human traffickers would disappear in the future, but at least after today's cleanup, they wouldn't be so unscrupulous anymore. Hellion Vivian was thinking about business, so she couldn't help but look at young Master Tang for a long time. Beligaju watched from the side and narrowed his eyes. He tightened his grip on Hellion Vivian's waist, but the corners of his mouth were still curled up. "You don't want to go?" Hellion Vivian didn't feel any pain, but she felt the strength. She looked up at His Highness but didn't say anything. Then she heard Beligaju's low voice. "I think this must be young Master Tang. Thank you for taking care of Hellion Vivian for the past few years. However, I heard that the Tang sect has a rule that anyone who leaves the Tang sect won't be asked to do any more missions." His tone was very polite with a sense of alienation and indifference, but it was also very domineering. Young Master Tang watched from the side with a playful look in his eyes. "This time I want to ask Hellion Vivian for help. You shouldn't mind." Before Hellion Vivian could say that she didn't mind, Qingchen tugged at her sleeve. "What?" Qingchen blinked her eyes and signaled for her to look at Beligaju's expression. In fact, nothing could be seen from His Highness' expression, but there was no trace of a smile in his eyes. This was the expression that Hellion Vivian was most familiar with. Although she didn't know why, Hellion Vivian could tell that His Highness wasn't in a good mood. Young Master Tang didn't mean to make things difficult for Hellion Vivian. He just wanted to see how much she cared about his comrades. That's right, they were comrades. Although it was a superior-subordinate relationship, it was closer than that. They had gone through life and death together, so their feelings were naturally different. Therefore, young Master Tang took a step back, still holding the cigarette in his hand. It seems that you mind. Hellion Vivian, since someone has come to ask you to take responsibility, this mission will be the last one. The matter in Yungui district is not over yet, and there is still one person who hasn't shown up. With this gentleman's help, you should be able to solve the problem soon. After this, neither the Tang sect nor I will ask you to take on any more missions. Of course, if someone treats you badly, the Tang sect will also be a very competent family. This sentence was more or less a declaration of his position. This was also the reason why no matter how far the Tang sect's shadow had gone, as long as the Tang sect gave the order, they would come back. The devilish training would indeed make people very difficult to get close to. However, along the way they had unknowingly changed from people who were very similar to each other to family. Hellion Vivian understood what young Master Tang meant, and so did Beligaju. His tone was very calm, but there was an innate sense of oppression. No one will treat her badly. Young Master Tang believed this, but he didn't know whether to say that it was Hellion Vivian's fortune or misfortune to have met such a man, because no matter how he looked at it, he knew more about Hellion Vivian. The more he knew, the more he calculated, the more important it was. It was just like how he treated someone. Young Master Tang understood this feeling very well. He and Beligaju treated their lovers the same way. Therefore, as early as when Beligaju leaned over and kissed Hellion Vivian, he knew that this man not only had a background, but also his thoughts were very complicated. Young Master Tang never liked to be enemies with such a person, and of course he wouldn't become friends with him. This was because he reckoned that young Master Tang didn't like him. However, this person was terrifying because he didn't show any hostility to him from the beginning to the end. No wonder Hellion Vivian fell for him. Young Master Tang curled his lower lip and did not dwell on this issue. Instead, he looked at Hellion Vivian and went straight to the point. There is another person in Yungui district who is the target of this mission, but this person is very smart. He didn't participate in the human trafficking, nor did he give sixth brother any convenience. However, every step that Lu Hongjiang took was guided by him. This person is now in the inner city and will be transferred back to the capital soon. Don't let such a person go back, as there are other factors to consider after he goes back. Just get rid of him while he is still in Li City. What we lack most now is evidence, and this evidence will be handed over to you for investigation. Monkey and the rest are waiting outside the door. Firstly, they want to meet you, and secondly, they are very interested in the man you slept with. Since you entered the Tang sect, it seems that you haven't had a holiday. You can take advantage of this time to go on a honeymoon with public funds. All the expenses will be paid by the Tang sect. Hellion Vivian had always been very interested in public funds. What's more, since they were already here, it would be fun to go to Li City on the way. She could also connect with her two sons. Unexpectedly, His Highness did not object, because he knew very well that the more he disagreed, the more it would cause a certain woman to retaliate. Some things had to be done step by step. Perhaps he could cooperate with the people of the Tang sect, as long as the content of the cooperation was that young Master Tang could not appear in front of Hellion Vivian in the future. Of course, these were all afterthoughts. His Highness would never just declare sovereignty from one side. More often than not, he would use the most direct aesthetics of violence. For example, the following content. Since we are done with the business, I have some private matters to discuss with Hellion Vivian. Please take the two brats with you when you leave and then close the door. When Beligaju said this sentence, the two little ones looked at each other silently, and then the enchantment set up by His Highness appeared in front of them. In just a moment, only Hellion Vivian and Beligaju were left in the interrogation room. Chapter 921. At this time, Hellion Vivian realized that something was wrong. Even if he wanted to talk, he didn't need to set up a barrier. Just as she was about to raise her head, someone suddenly picked her up by the waist. As the world spun, she was pressed down on the table. Hellion Vivian's blood froze in an instant because the sandalwood smell on the man was too strong, so strong that it was hard to forget. Bailey Jiaju wrapped his arm around her waist in a familiar manner. He only used force to pull, then pushed again. His arms supported himself on the wooden table, trapping her entire body between his chest and the wooden table. He sneered word by word. Just like that, a man's breath slowly slipped past her ears. He was very close to her, so close that she had no choice but to continuously retreat in order to avoid the invasive aura on his body. Hellion Weiwei was forced to raise her head. A pair of incomparably sharp black eyes just happened to meet hers. Those black eyes were exactly the same as in her memory, shining with light. Even in the darkness, they could still accurately find the prey, as firm and awe-inspiring as that night. "You seem to be very obedient to your benefactor?" Bailey Jiaju smiled. His gentle voice revealed a magnetic charm that could captivate one's heart and soul. His eyebrows and eyes were full of unbridled elegance. His expression was elegant to the peak. His smile and frown were like a brilliant neon in full bloom. "This is not a good sign because it will only make me want to lock you up. So you better be obedient, okay?" Hellion Vivian felt her claws being grabbed by someone. After so many years, she had the illusion that she was being kept in captivity again. Then, before she could react, Baligaju had already lifted her whole body, and even her chin was pinched by him. She had no choice but to open her mouth and let his tongue sweep through her mouth. Hellion Vivian only felt that her tongue was going to be numb from his sucking, but he still refused to let her go. He held her waist and wantonly lit fire on her clothes. She instinctively trembled, and when she thought that someone could break in at any time, she could no longer calm down. But he nibbled on her ear and kept rubbing it. "Is it comfortable?" He smiled wickedly as he slid his hand down to her neck. His fingers gently stroked back and forth as he held her back with one hand. In a voice that only the two of them could hear, he said, "Too bad this isn't a good place to do things." Hellion Vivian's legs were extremely weak. If it wasn't for him supporting her, she suspected that she would have collapsed to the ground like a puddle of water. She might as well just lie in his arms. He was happy to see her like this. He pulled her into his arms, wrapped her up horizontally, and strode out of the interrogation room. Outside the barrier, other than the two little ones, there was also a group of rough men. They had been waiting to see what the man their boss had slept with looked like, but when they looked up, they saw Hellion Vivian being carried out by a handsome man. Their jaws almost dropped to the ground. "This is the man that boss slept with? He doesn't look easy to deal with. Is he here to snatch little boss? I think he is more interested in boss than little boss." Several rough men stood in a row outside the Yunqing police station and whispered together. Behind them were 5 limited edition sports cars. Originally, this scene was very cool. Unfortunately, as soon as Baligaju appeared, he took away all their limelight. Old A could even hear the gasps of the girls who walked past him. This man was too dangerous. It was said that one should not marry a man who was too good-looking. He had always known that boss liked to judge people by their appearance, but he never thought that boss would judge people by their appearance to this extent. Of course, Baligaju also saw them. He glanced at them. Therefore, when Qingchen said in the beginning that she wanted to raise a little demon, Hellion Vivian had a ripple in her heart. She even went against her principle of not meddling in other people's business and wanted to snatch Shangxie and raise him. When she looked at Shangxie's face, she would think of her son who was supposed to be 1,000 years ago. She never dared to ask for too much. She could only fantasize in her heart and try her best to make up for it. Fortunately, they were all here. Hellion Vivian could not help but lower her eyes and kiss her eldest son's little head. Chapter 922. Bailey Shangxie did not expect that Hellion Vivian would do such a thing. His little body, which was originally fastening his younger brother's seat belt, was shocked. His cool little face showed a rare awkwardness. After all, he was a man and had never been kissed like this. He moved along, and when he turned his head, he could not help but smile. It was obvious that he liked it when Hellion Vivian kissed him. The family of 4 sat like this. The 2 little ones were in the innermost seat, while Baligaju was in the outermost seat. Compared to a civilian plane, a private plane was more spacious. Even the chairs were much softer. In addition, the cabin was spacious enough. In addition to food, Baligaju's favorite red wine was also prepared. Most importantly, there would not be any stewardesses here who would talk to Baligaju. No matter if it was the person flying the plane or the figure standing quietly at the side, they were not human. Apart from the green dragon and the fire Kirin, the handsome men in black suits on the plane all had a pair of blood-red eyes. Every time they addressed Bailey Shangxia as Little Master. This was simply Bailey Shangxia's world. He took out all the good things for his younger brother to play with. His every move was enough to show that he had good genes. It did not take much time to fly from Yun City to Li City, so the two little ones did not sleep. On the contrary, Hellion Vivian leaned on Baligaju's shoulder and slept a little soundly. Bailey Shangxia completely took on the responsibility of taking care of Qingchen. He was worried that Qingchen would have tinnitus when the plane landed, so he reached out his little hand and kept rubbing the little one's ears. Qingchen was also holding an ice cream in her hand. She passed a bite to Bailey Shangxia and took another bite herself. The two brothers did not need to worry about getting along with each other. It was obvious that Bailey Shangxia was very good at taking care of his little brother. Whenever he saw Qingchen's little sleeve fall, he would roll it up for him. However, the two ghost servants suffered. They had never taken a plane before when they were alive. After they died, they would float around on the ground. Now that they could see the white clouds when they lowered their heads, the feeling was quite uncomfortable. Baligaju sensed their little movements and turned to look at the two messengers. The latter instantly tensed up. One had to know that a big demon was much more terrifying than a small demon. The two of them were not on the same level at all. Baligaju didn't say anything. He just smiled evilly and placed his slender index finger on his lips. His meaning was obvious. He wanted them to not make a single sound. Otherwise, he would let them taste the taste of death again. The two messengers immediately stopped talking. They wanted to cry but had no tears. What kind of family was this? Baligaju never thought that this was a big deal. He had someone bring a blanket and covered Hellion Vivian's body. He held Hellion Vivian in one hand and took the information handed to him by his subordinate in the other. He had never been interested in traveling. It was inconvenient to do anything outside. He preferred to lock someone in the castle and let him do whatever he wanted. The corners of his mouth curved into a smile. Baligaju turned his face and kissed Hellion Vivian's hair. Hellion Vivian was still in a daze. Her cheek rubbed against his shoulder. She didn't open her eyes and spoke in a sleepy voice. "Have we arrived?" "Not yet. I'll tell you when we arrive." A certain highness voice was very deep. It always had a kind of magic that could help people fall asleep. "Keep sleeping." The familiar scent of peppermint sandalwood continuously wafted into Hellion Wei Wei's nose. This made Hellion Wei Wei's consciousness fall deeper and deeper. That magnetic voice also made people feel incomparably at ease. Baligaju saw that she had fallen asleep again. His lips curved into a smile. That kind of smile was so gentle that it didn't seem like him. Fire Qilin watched from the side. Incomparable joy surged in his heart. Because he couldn't imagine what his master would be like if he couldn't find the princess consort. A while ago he was so cold that he didn't have any emotions. Only the princess consort could make his master look like a human with flesh and blood. Bailey Shangxia was also aware of the change in his imperial father, but he had nothing to say. On the other hand, little Qingchen, who was chewing on his ice cream, looked at Bailey Jiaju and asked, "So you're not a scumbag?" In response to the question raised by his youngest son, Baligaju raised his eyebrows. "Of course not." Then he looked at Bailey Shangxia. His finger tapped the information in his hand. "Shangxia, I've told you before. You can do bad things but don't get caught by me. This principle is also applicable in school. Don't let me receive reports saying that you have a tendency to be violent, understand?" Bailey Shangxia didn't care. His voice was very cool. "After we go back, I'll get rid of the person who said that his younger brother is a country bumpkin. How dare he snitch? What a stupid human. It seems that I didn't hit him too hard back then." Country bumpkin? Baligaju had never interfered with his eldest son's behavior of taking in underlings in school. But this time it seemed that there was something else. This made Baligaju want to get rid of the matter in Dali as soon as possible and then fly back to the imperial capital to find out what happened that day. At this time, the noblewoman sitting in the kindergarten refused to compromise. She insisted that the school give an explanation. Her son couldn't be beaten up just like that, especially when Hellion Vivian's son was involved. If the other party was rich, she could still tolerate it. Why was Hellion Vivian ahead above all of them when they were in school? Now she was just a lousy car mechanic. Not only was she taking care of her own child, but she was also extremely poor. Even so, her son still wanted to bully her baby. Just wait, she'll definitely have a complete plan to make Hellion Wei, this woman, lose all face in front of all her classmates. After the noblewoman gave the school a final warning, she held little Fatty Cheng's hand and went home. She could almost imagine how Hellion Vivian would put down her pride and beg her after this weekend. Time passed by little by little. The sky in Dali City darkened later than in other cities, and the sunshine was much longer. The sun shone on one's body and it was warm, but the wind was a little strong. After getting off the private jet, Baligaju directly put the scarf that was prepared by his men on Hellion Vivian's shoulder. The two older ones walked in front while the two younger ones followed behind. Bailey Shangxia pulled his small suitcase in one hand and held Qinchen's hand, who was only a head shorter than him, in the other. They walked in front in a very cool manner, attracting many people's attention. Chapter 923. Qinchen was still holding the rope in her little hand, wobbling behind Bailey Shangxia, wearing a small leather hat on her head, looking at the crowd walking around with her big eyes. In order not to alert the enemy, Hellion Vivian did not let His Highness mobilize his people. The family of four, whether in terms of dress or itinerary, looked like tourists who came to Li City. Baligaju has always hated places with strong sunlight, so did Bailey Shangxia. One old and one young, each wearing a pair of pure black sunglasses, covering most of their face. But even so, when Baligaju appeared in the airport hall, it still caused an uproar. Whether it was in ancient times or modern times, he was like a natural light. Even in the crowd, his slender and tall figure could catch everyone's eyes at the first moment. Short silver hair, pure black sunglasses, a side face so white that women can't compare, and a handsome angular face, almost made the people who came to the airport to take the plane almost wonder if a superstar has come. However, even a superstar may not have the aura of this person. Only when he wore the latest trench coat, it seemed to show the essence of the noble and ascetic. His legs were very slender and he was tall. From this angle, only his tall nose and perfect thin lips could be seen. Bailey Shangxia was by his side. The father and son were very cool, a bit like a vampire aristocrat who came out of the TV. If you think that His Highness will carry the luggage, you are wrong. Throughout the whole journey, looking from afar, you can see an extremely handsome man walking slowly forward, followed by Hellion Vivian with long legs and long hair, pulling a large suitcase. Even Bailey Shangxia couldn't stand it. He always knew that his father was very shameless, but he didn't expect him to be shameless to this extent, even letting his mother carry the luggage. Baligaju didn't care what his son thought. For him, ordering Hellion Vivian around was also a kind of pleasure, because it was convenient for him to do other things. For example, when she was carrying her luggage, he could feed her a mouthful of water. It was just like raising the little phoenix back then. As Bailey Jiaju thought about it, in a place where Hellion Wei couldn't see, the corners of his mouth slowly curved up a little. His slender fingers twisted open the bottle cap, and his movements were natural as he handed it over to Hellion Wei. Hellion Vivian didn't feel that there was anything wrong with what she was doing. She pulled the suitcase happily. When she was thirsty, Baligaju would stop and let her drink some water. His Highness obviously didn't like this place, and so did Bailey Shangxia. As soon as they stepped out of the airport and the sun shone on them, they both frowned at the same time. Their expressions were practically synchronized. Hellion Vivian found it funny. She reached out and held His Highness's hand. "Isn't it too hot?" "Yes." Baligaju's voice was a little muffled. It was still low and cold, but it was different from when he was in front of others. "There are many people and the sun is also very hot." Bailey Shangxia looked at his father disapprovingly. As a demon with a divine sense, how could he be afraid of the sun? He could obviously put up a defense by himself, but he just had to show weakness in front of his mother. He finally knew why his mother defined him as a domineering president. It was because a certain someone's shamelessness had far exceeded his imagination. He was simply unscrupulous. In some aspects, the father and son were very much in sync. After noticing Bailey Shangxia's gaze, Baligaju slowly glanced over. That gaze was filled with a meaning that only the father and son could understand. Bailey Shangxia wasn't interested in exposing his father's trick, so he turned his head and continued to roll up Chinchin's sleeves. Hellion Vivian also felt that the sun was too hot, so she simply used a scarf to prop up the shadow. Chinchin was even more thorough. Her small body moved forward and blocked Bailey Shangxia's entire body. Her other hand held the iced milk that she bought and handed it to Bailey Shangxia to drink. The big suitcase was just enough for Chinchin to sit on. Baligaju thought for a moment, then picked up Chinchin with one hand and threw her on top. Then he signaled Bailey Shangxia to push it. He had never seen such a relaxed father. Fortunately, Bailey Shangxia was very reliable. As the most frightening little master in the demon world, pushing a suitcase was a piece of cake. In order to prevent Chinchin from falling, Bailey Shangxia considerately used his other small arm to cross in front of the suitcase. That cool little face was full of seriousness. Hellion Vivian was left with only a small suitcase in her hand. She had no problem carrying it with one hand. Since they were disguised as tourists, they couldn't ride the BMW Tomahawk or drive a sports car. S and the others all stayed in place and waited for orders. They would only appear when needed. The accommodation was also booked in advance. It wasn't a big hotel but a local hostel. Everything was to better understand Lee City. Before Hellion Vivian came, young Master Tang gave her a document. The document showed that there was once a university student who wanted to report something on the internet. But before she could explain the matter clearly, the university student disappeared. Hellion Vivian could only start an investigation based on the university student's last appearance. An international hostel with a good reputation. Hellion Vivian believed that there would be no problem with this hostel. But at least they could know the range of activities of the missing university student there. There were many taxis outside the airport. Hellion Vivian reached out and stopped one. She took the two little ones to sit in the back seat. Baligaju sat in the front with his long legs, exuding a noble aura. When the taxi driver saw them, his eyes suddenly lit up. While driving, he talked about the local customs of Lee City. He turned his face and asked, "It's your first time in Lee City, right? Have you found a good place to stay?" Baligaju didn't speak. He only turned his head and glanced at him. With just a glance, the taxi driver immediately stopped talking. He didn't know what he felt at that moment. It was as if his whole soul was about to be taken away. Fortunately, he came back to his senses in time. His palms were still sweaty, and there was an unknown fear in his heart. Did he see wrongly? How could this person's eyes be red? Now that the noise was gone, Bailey Jiaju turned his head and looked out of the window through his sunglasses. However, his hand was placed on the car window. His silver hair was blown away by the wind, revealing his bright and clean forehead. He was born with an air of nobility. No matter what kind of vehicle he was on, his casual movement was like taking a picture of a poster. Chapter 924. The taxi driver calmed down with lingering fear. Seeing this, Hellion Vivian chuckled and said, "I've booked a place to stay, but I don't know how to arrange the itinerary." Hearing this, the taxi driver immediately said, "I know a good travel agency here. You're going out as a family of 4, so don't play by yourself. It's very convenient to sign up for a group trip. One person costs 150 yuan a day and you can visit 2 scenic spots." That's not bad. Hellion Vivian's eyes flashed and there was still a smile on her lips. "Which travel agency? Let's go and have a look when we're free." The taxi driver was very enthusiastic. "It's right in front. I'll take you there in a while, but your inn is not very good. Why did you book the North Gate? The South Gate is the busiest. Do you need me to recommend an inn for you? Costs 80 yuan a day, much cheaper than the one you booked." "That won't be necessary. We've booked a special family room. Children will like it." Hellion Weiwei sounded like she was just chatting. However, Chinchin knew that with Beauty Vivian's personality, she would never chat with anyone. The taxi driver didn't insist. With a smile on his face, he gave a very warm and good impression. "The travel agency is in front. You can take a look at the itinerary. If you're satisfied, I'll pick you up tomorrow." "You'll pick me up? The driver is also responsible for picking up tourists?" Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. The taxi driver smiled and said, "We're all from the same company, so we can pick up tourists for free. Don't worry, everything is very formal." If you don't want me to pick you up, you can go to the designated place and take a taxi yourself. It's not convenient for your family of 4 to live in the North Gate. Hellion Vivian smiled and didn't say anything more. After getting off the taxi, they saw a local travel agency. The decoration was very formal, and it specialized in picking up individual tourists. Many people were buying tickets and the price was very affordable. Hellion Vivian hadn't stopped thinking since she walked into this travel agency. Because in the information given to her by young Master Tang, it seemed to vaguely mention that the missing female college student had also signed up for this travel agency. She had been missing for a long time, and in this situation she must be dead. But why did she go missing? Where did she go missing? It was all a mystery. There was an explanation from Lee City. Nowadays, there were too many university students who came out to travel on a budget. It was common for them to go missing by accident. There were also those who ran into danger while trying to escape the fair and took the small path up the mountain, never to come down again. As that was correct. Indeed, such a situation would occur. However, the more this was the case, the more Hellion Vivian felt strange. This was because this missing college student was not a poor traveler. Although she had booked a youth tour, it was a special room and the price was not cheap. Moreover, she had flown all the way here and even signed up for a tour group. No matter how she thought about it, there should not be an accident. The family of the female university student thought so too, so they had been asking for an answer from Lee City. The answer was given, but it was even more infuriating than the first one. In general, it was about a girl who was overjoyed when she arrived at Lee City. She wanted to have a beautiful relationship but was accidentally sold by someone, and so on and so forth. The continent had always been like this. Many people had never truly respected women. A girl had been raped. They would say that this kind of thing was simply a matter of one's willingness to be beaten and one's willingness to be beaten. A girl dressed up so beautifully in the middle of the night, wasn't she looking for trouble? Fuck your willingness to be beaten and one's willingness to be beaten. A girl dressed up to make herself happy. Why should she be raped just because she was pretty? When Hellion Vivian saw this excuse, her fingers clenched the information in her palm. It was because of this that she wanted to investigate this case thoroughly. She could understand the feelings of a family member. No mother would want her daughter to be talked about like this. The missing victim was obviously her own daughter, but she had to be slandered like this. Even the reason given was so chilling. Hellion Vivian lost her mother when she was young, so when she saw the information about a mother who ran from the capital to Lee City for her daughter, back and forth trying to get an answer, Hellion Vivian made up her mind at that time. She must give the other party a perfect answer, even if the answer would hurt her more. However, Hellion Vivian knew that sometimes, a mother just wanted to know what happened to her daughter. Hellion Vivian thought of this and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she was already shrewd. Before she walked to the counter of the travel agency, she was warmly stopped by a tour guide and asked if she needed any help. Since she was a tourist, of course she had to ask about the scenic spots. Fortunately, Hellion Vivian was very concise. She asked a few questions in less than a few minutes. The tour guide was very patient when she answered. After Hellion Vivian understood, she said, "Then I'll think about it. If I want to play tomorrow, I'll contact you. Hey, this is my business card. Please keep it well." The tour guide gave the business card to Hellion Vivian. When she went out, she even greeted the taxi driver. It was obvious that the two of them knew each other. The taxi driver looked at Hellion Vivian from the rearview mirror and said, "What did I say? We are all from the same company. We are very formal. Don't worry." Hellion Vivian was the only one who got out of the car to ask. The two little ones and a certain highness were sitting in the car. They didn't even listen to the driver's words. When they arrived at the place where they lived, Bailey Shangxia smiled at the driver. That smile was full of evil, as if the other party had already become the food on his table. Baligaju knew that at this time his eldest son was hungry. He reached out and picked the little one up. His voice was a little cold. "You want to eat everything? Where are your dining etiquette?" The driver thought that the child had seen the bread in his car. He shook his head and smiled. Very disapprovingly, he continued to turn his head to Hellion Vivian and told her to contact him when she made a decision. He could pick them up at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Hellion Vivian replied, "Oh, only then did the driver start the car." Qingchen watched from the side and shook her little head like a little adult. She thought to herself, if you don't leave now, you will be left with a corpse. What an ignorant driver. He actually dared to ask the family of 4 to sign up for a group tour. He could imagine what kind of scene would be tomorrow. He had to prepare more chocolate so that he could sit by the side and eat chocolate while watching the show. On the other side, Bailey Shangxie was not angry that there was no food. He turned around coolly and held Qingqin's hand. In his heart, taking care of his little brother was more important than eating. Chapter 925. Helian Wei Wei finished checking in and conveniently took her luggage upstairs. As a result, His Highness was once again looked down upon by others. Under everyone's piercing gazes, a certain highness walked up the stairs with a clear conscience. In fact, the luggage was nothing to Helian Vivian. If it was really heavy, Beligaju wouldn't have asked her to carry it. Since Helian Vivian performed very well, His Highness was prepared to give her a very beautiful surprise tonight. Helian Vivian didn't know what His Highness was thinking. If she knew, her mood would definitely be indescribable. Because what His Highness described as a pleasant surprise, to Helian Wei Wei, was usually a shock. Helian Vivian didn't need to worry about the 2 little ones. The family room was on the 2nd floor. It was a beautiful small attic. The room was very large and had an ancient style. It leaned against the mountain and one could overlook the ancient city when they opened the window. The small leather suitcase in Bailey Shangxia's hand had been taken up by Helian Vivian. He was only responsible for holding Qingqin's hand, who was still a little shaky when she walked. As a good brother, Bailey Shangxia was very attentive to Qingqin. He was afraid that Qingqin would fall, so he almost followed by Qingqin's side. His short legs moved forward like a little gentleman. He turned around and held Qingqin's hand as they walked up the wooden stairs step by step. Compared to Bailey Shangxia, His Highness was really a stark contrast. In the family room, the children were prepared with wooden bunk beds. Bailey Shangxia was sleeping on the top bunk. In a flash, he sat on the top bunk and placed his little pillow properly. Then he helped little Qingqin change his clothes, buttoned up his shirt and prepared all these things before heading out for dinner. In the past, Qingqin always wore her own clothes. She couldn't fix her sleeves properly. Now she sat on the bed obediently and stretched out her small arms for Bailey Shangxia to help her. Helian Wei Wei looked at her 2 sons. She could not help but hug both of their little heads and give each of them a kiss. Qingqin stretched out 2 small hands and pressed his head. "Beauty Vivian, my hair is going to be messed up by you. You can't just kiss a gentleman, do you understand?" I know, Helian Vivian said perfunctorily and kissed that little head again very insincerely. Qingqin still liked how close Helian Vivian was to him. She nestled in Bailey Shangxia's arms with a smile. Bailey Shangxia also found the feeling of the past. He vaguely remembered the past. At that time he was still in his mother's belly holding his younger brother and talking. His mother rubbed her belly like this, looking forward to their birth every day. Helian Vivian naturally kissed Bailey Shangxia and she kissed him twice at once. Beligaju watched from the side. He was originally sitting on a wooden chair on the observation deck, shaking a glass of red liquid in his hand. After seeing Helian Vivian's actions, he raised his eyebrows. However, he reached out and put down the goblet. Then he strode over to Helian Wei Wei's side. His Highness thought that according to this situation, after kissing the 2 brats, she would kiss him. Unexpectedly, after Helian Vivian kissed the 2 brats, she went straight to put away her luggage, completely ignoring the man who was already standing behind her. Beligaju's eyes darkened. He looked at the luggage as if he wanted to throw it out of the window. The 2 brats could only sense their father's thoughts. They looked at Beligaju, who was standing in the same spot with narrowed eyes, and laughed. Their little faces were full of gloating. Their father must have never thought that he would be the one who would lose out in the end when he let their mother carry the luggage. Beligaju glanced over and curled his lips coldly. These 2 brats were not worth his attention. He only needed to care about one person. In the middle of the family room was a hall. Helian Vivian had to put her luggage behind a wooden sliding door. Beligaju strode in with his long legs. He was very fast. With one hand on the wooden door behind him, he pulled Helian Vivian's arm with the other. With a strong force of his wrist, she fell into his arms just like that. The tip of her nose was pressed against his chest. Under her palm, she could hear the continuous sound of his strong heartbeat. His breath still lingered between her lips. Helian Vivian pressed down on his hand. Hey, I'm still packing my luggage. That's why I came to help you. Beligaju hugged her without any intention of letting go. Did he need to kiss someone to help him pack his luggage? Helian Wei Wei tried to push him away with her hands. Who knew that he would reach out his hand and press down on her back forcefully? She fell back into his arms again, closer than before. He had no intention of letting go of her at all. The strength in his arms did not decrease in the slightest. Instead, his clear peach blossom eyes became darker and darker. It was as if there was a fire burning in them, making one's mouth dry up. In the next second, that handsome face pressed down on her. The cold aura was more wanton than ever before. It was as if he finally couldn't bear it anymore and exploded all his worries. Helian Vivian only felt pain and numbness from his caressing. Even her legs felt weak. However, he had no intention of letting her go at all. With full patience, he kissed her gently as if he was coaxing her. The kiss gradually came to an end. Helian Vivian's vision was already blurred. She let him put her down on the floor. Bang. The wooden door was kicked open by Bailey Shangxiakuli. With a sly smile on his face, he said, "I'm hungry. Let's go downstairs to eat." Beligaju took a deep breath and turned his head. His eyes darkened slightly. He reached out and picked up Bailey Shangxia. With a mischievous smile, he said, "It seems that our conversation just now was not deep enough." Bailey Shangxia looked at his father vigilantly. He wanted to slip away. "It's already very deep. I want to take my younger brother downstairs to eat." Beligaju picked up his son and exuded a demonic aura. "Before eating, it's best to exercise. Otherwise, how can you take good care of your younger brother?" "I can take good care of my younger brother without exercising." Bailey Shangxia instinctively felt that it was dangerous. Beligaju did not give him any chance to refuse. He directly pressed the little one down and said in a low voice, "After 100 frog jumps, we will go downstairs. Maybe you want to go back to the demon world more?" Bailey Shangxia did not want to go back to the demon world the most. As soon as Beligaju mentioned this matter, he immediately became obedient. When Helian Vivian came over to ask, Bailey Shangxia did not complain. He was afraid that his vengeful father would throw him into the demon world. "Shangxia and I will exercise for a while first," Beligaju told Helian Vivian. His tone was extremely evil. Chapter 926. Helian Vivian more or less knew what was going on, but she didn't really care about it. After all, in her eyes, this was also a way for father and son to communicate their feelings. Although their family's way of communication was a little different from other people's. 1, 2, 3, 10. In the room, the little one held his head coolly, kicked his legs and jumped forward. Beligaju looked at him lazily, crossed his legs and leaned against the door. "Little brat, who taught you that after 4 is 10? Bailey Shangxia, are you challenging my intelligence? I thought you would become kinder after you found mother." Bailey Shangxia snorted coldly, jumping and talking at the same time, looking cool and cute. Beligaju lowered his head and flipped through the information in his hand, not feeling the slightest bit because of his son's accusation. "Facts have proven that it was all your imagination. Also, don't think that I don't know what you are thinking. Compared to you interrupting my good deeds and constantly slandering me, this punishment is considered light. Continue to jump, there are still 80 more." Bailey Shangxia wailed, holding his little head and jumping up and down again. After 10 minutes, Beligaju put on his sunglasses, held Bailey Shangxia's hand and went downstairs to eat. As for holding hands, Bailey Shangxia was against it. Beligaju looked at him indifferently. "Do you want your mother to know that we don't have a good relationship?" He only knew how to use his mother to pressure others. Bailey Shangxia disdained his father's shamelessness, but he didn't want to show anything bad in front of his mother and younger brother. It had to be said that in terms of acting, the father and son were extremely imaginative. The food in the inn was very delicious, and it was highly recommended on the internet. They even thoughtfully prepared barley tea. Helian Vivian ordered a table full of dishes and put Qingchen on a soft chair. Qingchen's table manners had always been very good. She was holding her own small bowl and chopsticks, and there was a white napkin in front of her clothes. When she saw Bailey Shangxia coming, she took the initiative to prepare her brother's bowl and chopsticks. Bailey Shangxia had always been indifferent to human food. Other than chocolate and ice cream, he basically ate nothing. They were slightly better off than vampires. Demons could still eat, but vampires couldn't ingest anything other than fresh blood. They couldn't even see the sun. Bailey Shangxia also hated sunlight, and so did his father. If one wanted to pass through the space-time gap, they would have to pay a certain price. Especially when this space-time gap was torn open by his father, the loss would be greater. His father had never told anyone about this matter. Perhaps only he, who was also a demon, knew about it. As soon as he walked into the restaurant, Baligaju took off his sunglasses. The moment his face was exposed, both the diners and the staff in the restaurant couldn't help but look at him. Too handsome. He looks like someone who walked out of a comic. His hair is still silver. Is it dyed? I don't think so. He should be a mixed blood. Look at his child's eyes. They are red and bright like gems. Are all the children overseas so good-looking? You didn't see the child's mother. When I was serving the dishes just now, I took a look. Oh my God, she is so beautiful. She has no makeup on. He is super nice. When she was ordering, she kept smiling at me. She is very elegant. Also, she is with her little son. He is tying the napkin by himself just like a little prince. This is a winner in life. Not only is her husband handsome, but her two sons are soft and cool. Oh my God, this woman must have saved the galaxy in her previous life. Hellion Vivian had always been good at self-restraint. When she heard the girls talking like this, she turned her head and smiled at them. That kind of smile seemed to obscure her gender with a different kind of evil charm. The girls had a better impression of her. They were eager to take photos of this family of four. But when they pressed the button to take photos, their phones all crashed at the same time. It was as if all the power was suddenly taken away. It was very strange. All their attention was on their phones, so they didn't notice that when Bailey Jiajue put down the wine glass in his hand, there was a flash of light in the bottom of his eyes. Bailey Shangxia didn't care who took photos of him. Anyway, his first thought after coming to modern times was that he wanted to be a superstar in the future. Since he wanted to be a star, of course he had to get used to various kinds of cameras. However, he was very clear in his heart that with his own father's possessiveness, he would never allow his mother to be taken photos of casually. Hellion Vivian, as before, buried her head and ate. Her whole little face was bulging. When she saw delicious food, she would always put it on Baligaju's plate. Baligaju couldn't eat more than 2 mouthfuls. His arm was on the back of her chair. Most of the time he was putting food on Vivian's plate. His posture was indescribably gentle. The two little ones ate very well, especially Qingchen, who was biting the small ribs in her mouth. She looked very cute. Bailey Shangxia's job from beginning to end was to roll up his little brother's sleeves. After dinner, Hellion Vivian took the adults and the two little ones into the ancient city for a walk. The ancient city of Li City was very beautiful, especially at night. There were all kinds of lights and feast. There were all kinds of snacks, indescribable small shops with ethnic characteristics, and melodious songs in the Westerner street. Little Qingchen had eaten too much for dinner. He kept rubbing his little belly and swaying as he walked. Bailey Shangxia held her hand. From time to time he lowered his head and said a few words to his little brother. The two little ones whispered in each other's ears. The general content of the conversation was that when they returned to the kindergarten, they must accept a lot of underlings. Little Qingchen concurred in agreement. Hellion Vivian listened in the front and was very confused. Why did she always feel that her sons were raised astray? The two little ones were very obedient. Qingchen encountered a large dog on the road. Suddenly she stopped and ran towards Hellion Vivian. Beauty Hellion Vivian, Xiaohei hasn't been out recently. Hellion Vivian didn't say anything. Baligaju narrowed his eyes, then reached out and pinched his eldest son's ear. A black earring used to suppress the magic appeared on Bailey Shangxia's ear bone. Almost instantly, a demon dog with black fog all over its body appeared in front of Qingchen. Its hair was black and dense like a mixed-blood Tibetan mastiff. It immediately attracted the attention of the people on the street. The demon dog was very obedient to its little master. It followed the two little ones obediently throughout the whole process, never leaving their side. Right at this moment, Chapter 927. There was a commotion in front of them. Seemed like someone was fighting. It sounded like it was because of a tourism dispute. Hellion Vivian's eyes paused for a moment. She raised her eyes and looked in the direction of the commotion. Usually it wouldn't be serious in this place. After all, it was a key scenic spot and was protected. However, the situation was a little bad. Because it would take some time for the police to arrive, the situation would be a little difficult to control. It was like a family of 4 was traveling, but unlike Hellion, Vivian and the others, there was an old lady in the other party's camp. The old lady was so scared that her face turned pale. She was afraid that her son would be beaten, so she kept saying, "Forget it, forget it." The other group of people were like bandits. They looked at the middle-aged man in front of them arrogantly. Although they lowered their voices, they could be heard around them. "I'm telling you, don't be a busybody. Otherwise, we won't let you out of this place." The middle-aged man's conditions should be considered well off. He was wearing a suit and his face was red as he said, "Call the police." When the leader heard that he was going to call the police, he surrounded him even more tightly. Not only did he beat him, but he also wanted to kick the old lady aside. However, just as that person raised his hand to kick the old lady, someone grabbed his arm. It was Hellion Vivian. She looked at the man and there was a cold light in her eyes. "You even hit an old lady? Are you still a man?" The leading man turned his head and looked over. Originally, his face was full of fierceness, but after seeing Wei Wei's appearance in a flash, it became ambiguous. With a teasing expression, he made a yo sound and wanted to turn his hand around and touch the back of Wei Wei's hand. But before he could do that, his whole body froze. 3 figures stood in front of him. 1 was big and 2 were small. All of them were looking at him with the same gaze. There was a faint light in their eyes, like sticky blood flowing in them. The man didn't know why, but he had the illusion that he was nailed to a chopping board and would be cut into pieces at any time. Very soon, almost in the next second, he realized that it wasn't an illusion. This was because the eyes of the person standing in front of him were really blood red. The enchanting aura hidden in the darkness slowly dispersed from his eyes. His handsome face was so pale that there was almost no trace of blood. The fangs that represented evil grew in his mouth. The cold aura that was filled with dense killing intent spread out from his face that was shrouded in black fog. A bloodthirsty cruelty filled the air. That person's mouth still had an evil smile. His voice was low like a beautiful melody. "Do you want to die?" The leader shuddered at first. After all, the evil aura coming from Beligaju was too heavy, so heavy that no one could bear it. But soon, that person snorted coldly, because he had already seen the auxiliary police coming from a distance. In Lee City, no one had ever dared to say such words to him. He was someone who had connections with that person, so who wouldn't give in to him? Even if the other party was a foreigner, they would have to listen to him in Lee City. "You better get out of my way. Don't be a busybody. Who doesn't know how to say harsh words? You still ask me if I want to die. Let me tell you, if you dare to interfere in this matter today, don't even think about leaving Lee City. I have people above me, be careful not to kill you." The man's face was full of fierceness. Beligaju smiled. Without saying anything, he directly stretched out a pale and colorless palm. In a strange posture that tore through the darkness, he went straight for the man's neck. Coldness was the first thing that entered the man's mind. Then it was pain, and finally it was panic. This was because he was being strangled by the neck and was lifted into the air. The feeling of his feet leaving the ground made him lose his center of gravity in an instant. His lips began to tremble slightly. Fear filled his eyes. He hissed and gasped, let go," because his throat was tightly strangled. It was extremely difficult for the man to even open his mouth. His legs were thumping as if he was calling for help. "Let go of him." All the auxiliary police officers ran over with electric batons in their hands. However, Beligaju acted as if he did not hear anything. The corner of his mouth was filled with viciousness. That was a killing intent that had not been shown for a long time. His 10 ivory-like fingers were as strong as white jade. With a cruel and irresistible force, he tightly squeezed the man's neck, making it hard for him to budge. Perhaps this was the once famous overlord who ruled over the demons. "Help!" The man wailed like a ghost and howled like a wolf. His face was distorted and pale. Hellion Vivian knew that this was not the time to kill anyone. She was not worried about anything, but mainly she did not want His Highness to have too much blood on his hands. Her principle of doing things had never changed. Evildoers should be punished by everyone. It was never for their own selfish desires. As Hellion Vivian thought about it, she reached out and hugged His Highness from behind. Only then did that soaring hostility calm down. Beligaju casually threw the man aside and raised his eyebrows at Hellion Vivian. "Why are you acting coquettishly?" Hellion Vivian was speechless. She had only stopped him for a moment. Was that considered acting coquettishly? She had to admit that His Highness's definition of coquettishly was really broad. Beligaju pulled Hellion Vivian over with a smile. His entire body was as noble as a flower, forming a strong contrast with the person who had fallen to the ground like a dog eating feces. That person exhaled and wanted to stand up and teach Beligaju a lesson. The person behind him reached out and pulled him back, reminding him in a deep voice, "The auxiliary police officers are here." The person in the lead spat fiercely. Before the real victim could speak, he started talking to the auxiliary police officers who had rushed over. They were all speaking in the local language. Although Hellion Vivian couldn't understand, she could tell from their attitude how rude this person was. Barbaric and uncivilized was probably referring to this kind of person. However, it was obvious that the auxiliary police officer and the person in the lead knew each other. After all, they were locals, so it wasn't strange that they knew each other. The auxiliary police officer had probably encountered this kind of thing too many times, so he could be considered to be impartial. First, he asked the group of people to leave, then glanced at Hellion Vivian and the others. Finally, his gaze landed on the middle-aged man who had been beaten up. Chapter 928. Then what else do you want? The voice of the auxiliary police officer also became louder. "It's just a small matter, right? Do you have to make the old man suffer too?" The middle-aged man did not speak, but his hands were clenched into a ball. Only he himself knew how sullen his heart was. He originally spent money to have fun, who knew that he would be bullied to this extent. The few locals' faces were full of pride. They looked at the middle-aged man condescendingly, then glanced at Beligaju's direction, as if saying that after I've dealt with him, I'll deal with you. Seeing that the middle-aged man remained silent, the auxiliary police officer's attitude softened. He reached out and patted his shoulder. All right, go back up. Have fun in Lee City, such a beautiful scenery, you can't see it no matter how much money you spend." Upon hearing this, Hellion Vivian's eyes flashed with layers of coldness. Qingchen knew that it was the precursor of her anger. Sure enough, in the next second, Hellion Vivian spoke. "Excuse me, can you not see the injury on this gentleman's face? According to Article 384 of the criminal law, those who deliberately hurt the body of others shall be sentenced to imprisonment of not more than 3 years, criminal detention or public surveillance. It's obvious who is the victim in this matter, who is the one who did it, these few." As she spoke, Hellion Vivian reached out and pointed at the leader. "Starting a brawl and hurting others, shouldn't he be the one being interrogated? You smelly." The leader saw Hellion Vivian pointing at him and immediately became angry. The anger that he had just suffered exploded in an instant. He waved his hand, wanting to hit Hellion Vivian. This time, without waiting for Beligaju to make a move, Hellion Vivian directly grabbed the man's wrist, using a lot of strength in her fingers. The man grimaced in pain and shouted, "Ouch, ouch, ouch. You let go of me." Bang. Before the man could finish, Hellion Vivian kicked him. The kick was handsome and accurate. The speed was so fast that the man was kicked half a meter away before he could react. The auxiliary police officers were annoyed. They picked up the stun batons and pointed at Hellion Vivian. "You, legitimate self-defense." Hellion Vivian cut them off. "What? If you want to arrest me, that's fine. I can sue you for not only not helping the victims during the enforcement of the law, but also helping the local hooligans. I think no matter where you are, a lawyer's license will be useful. What do you think?" The auxiliary police officers knew that in their line of work, they could provoke anyone but a lawyer. Lawyers were different from ordinary people. They knew the law too well. If this matter really got out of hand, it would not do them any good. Even though they were hot-blooded, when the auxiliary police officers saw that the situation was not right, they did not act like they did in the past. They just looked at each other and said, "Madam, in the end, what happened today is not a big deal. There's no need to make it a big deal. Let's all take a step back. At most, I'll ask these people to apologize to you. He really should apologize, but not to me. He should apologize to his family." Hellion Vivian's voice was faint, but there was an irresistible sense of oppression. The auxiliary police officers weighed the pros and cons. They looked at the leading man and reprimanded him. "Hurry up and apologize. After you apologize, this matter will be over." The leader of the group knew what the auxiliary police officers meant. If a lawyer was involved in this matter, it would not be easy to handle. After all, Lee City was their territory. If he apologized today, he could wait until there was no one around tomorrow. He could cover the heads of these people and beat them up, and they might not know about it. He had a plan in his mind. He smiled and started to call the middle-aged man who was beaten up brother. "Brother, none of us wanted to make this happen. This time it's my fault. I was angry too. Think about it, buying jade is like eating, there's a price tag. You're willing to buy it, but after you've bought it and eaten it, you say you don't want it anymore. I'm not the one who sold the jade, right? How do you want me to retreat? Look, we came out to play, isn't it just to have fun? Don't let your old mother, wife, and daughter suffer with you." On the surface, it sounded like an apology, but in fact, anyone who has been in society knew that one must consider all aspects before doing something. After all, the middle-aged man was unfamiliar with Lee City. If it wasn't for the appearance of a lawyer, the auxiliary police officers would only play down the matter and not get an apology. If he insisted on getting justice, he would probably get revenge in the end. Like what the other party said, they wouldn't even be able to leave Lee City. He didn't have anything to do with himself, but he still had his wife, daughter, and mother. If they were injured and dragged up like just now, he really couldn't do anything. This time he would just treat it as a lesson. The middle-aged man reluctantly agreed to reconcile, and this matter finally came to an end. But it was obvious that those people were eyeing Hellion, Vivian, and the rest. When the high school student and the old woman who bought fruit saw this, they whispered to Hellion, Vivian, and the rest to leave as soon as possible. It would be best to leave today. Otherwise, when the auxiliary police officers were gone tomorrow, this group of people would have no scruples and would definitely find trouble with them. They were all locals, but the difference was obvious. Hellion, Vivian liked the ancient city of Lee City very much. It made people feel comfortable, and some children and old people were also very warm and honest. But there were some phenomena that she had to pay attention to. Perhaps this could be a breakthrough. Hellion, Vivian's eyes flashed. She carefully connected all the information in her mind, and seemed to have gotten some answers. The middle-aged man came over, and the whole family sincerely thanked Hellion, Vivian. "Thank you so much for just now. If it wasn't for your help, I really don't know what the consequences would be." Hellion, Vivian waved her hand and smiled. "Just what exactly happened? Why did you guys fight? Do you mind telling me? Is that person a jade salesman?" "Oh, not a jade salesman." The middle-aged man squeezed out a smile on his face. "They are more deceitful than jade salesmen. They are just like vampires, there is no difference. I am very grateful to these people and the locals. It is very beautiful here, but my next plot is to remind the girls who come here to play in the future to pay attention to their safety. I hope you can play well in the future. Good night." Chapter 929. If they're not selling jade, then who are they? Hellion, Vivian raised her eyebrows. The middle-aged man and his mother looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with fatigue. His wife let out a long sigh and shook her head. "It's all my fault. What does this have to do with you? Anyone would have thought that they would be so deceitful." The middle-aged man turned his head and said to Hellion, Wei, "Here's the thing, my mother is too old and my daughter is still young, so my wife and I thought that we shouldn't go out alone this time. Everyone said that the scenery in Lee City is great, so after we arrived at Kunming, we took a train and arrived here. Everything was fine at first, but after we arrived at Lee City, there were very few regular taxis near the train station. Most of them were taxis doing business. We really felt the enthusiasm of Lee City, so we took a taxi. The driver didn't ask for a lot of money, but he was very nice and introduced us to the scenery along the way. Then he asked if we had booked a hotel, and if we didn't have a place to stay, he could recommend it to us. I thought he was a nice guy, so I chatted with him for a while and told him that we had booked a hotel, so we were going to have some fun here. The driver didn't force us to stay at his place. Instead, he was very enthusiastic and said that it was good to stay in the ancient city. At night, we could go to the Westerners' Street. However, he said that since we were a family of 4 and had an old mother, it would be best if we could sign up for a tour. There were some places in Lee City that were still very tiring, such as Tsang Mountain and Huanghuai. These were not very convenient. At first, I planned to rent a car and drive to Huanghuai after arriving in Lee City. Since Song Mountain was a scenic spot, it was better to sign up for a tour, so I followed the driver to the travel agency he recommended. There were many people in the travel agency who were here to sign up for a tour. After seeing them, I felt relieved and paid the money to one of the tour guides. The tour guide was none other than Director Liu, who had just fought with me. At first, he was very considerate and spoke in the local dialect. He even said that we didn't need to worry about the next day, as he would send the driver to pick us up and send us to the tour bus. There were many individual tour groups like this in Lee City. Under normal circumstances, there would be 2 attractions a day. The first attraction would be to visit the biculture, and the second attraction would be to visit the Romance Island in Nanzhou. My wife and I didn't think much about it. The next day, the driver who had picked us up from the train station sent us directly to the tour bus. There were about 30 people on the tour bus, all of whom were individual tour groups. Along the way, Director Liu introduced us to the local customs of Lee City and told us the story of her tour group. She also told us the joke of a brother and sister who had bought a jade bracelet. She said that Lee City was very close to Myanmar, so it was very convenient to obtain raw materials. The price of jade was very cheap, and there was room for promotion if you bought it back. After she finished talking, she brought the group of us to a jewelry store in Lee City. The store looked very formal. Initially, I didn't have any intention to buy anything. My wife had always been good to my mother. She said that my mother's birthday was coming up soon, so she wanted to buy a jade bracelet for the elderly. Everyone knew that jade was good for the elderly, but the price of the jade bracelet was a little high, about $20,000. I was a little hesitant. The sales assistant was very professional. She held a mobile phone and taught you how to look at the purity and transparency of the jade. She said that if I was still worried, I could go to the appraisal office on the first floor to have it appraised. They were all A-grade jade, and after the purchase, they would issue a national appraisal certificate. Hearing the sales assistant's words, I was tempted. After all, this area was indeed very close to the jade production area. I thought that there shouldn't be any problems, so I let my wife pay for it. After all, it was her filial piety. At that time, my mother kept saying that she didn't want it, but I could tell that my mother liked it very much. In the end, after we left the jewelry store, the tour guide brought us to a silverware store. After a while, I realized that something was wrong. Wasn't it supposed to be a purely recreational tour? Where was the cultural tour of the Bai people? Why was it always about buying things? After the silverware store, we went to a tea shop. Indeed, the tour guide talked a little about the Bai people's culture. He said that the local people called the girls golden flower. However, after drinking tea, the girls who made the tea asked us to buy tea leaves to drink. I began to have doubts in my heart. I didn't even want to take the cruise. Before I confirmed it, I didn't dare to tell my mother and wife. However, spending money was a small matter, and my mother was already very tired. No one would be able to stand shopping like this. The first thing I did when I returned to the hotel was to make a call. I asked my friends if they knew anything about jade and if they could help me appraise a piece of jade. After about an hour, my friend called and said that if I bought the jade bracelet in the mall, it would be worth at most $3,000. After hearing this answer, I was dumbfounded. I had expected the price to be high, at most $2,000 or $3,000. However, I didn't expect the bracelet to be worth less than a fraction of that price. I couldn't accept the fact that the real thing was worth so much less than the purchase price. I thought back to the time when I was introduced to Jubilee Jewelry. I had seen on the official website that you could request a refund within 30 days. Therefore, I immediately contacted the after-sales staff of the Jubilee Jewelry Mall. The first thing they said was that they didn't want a refund. They told me to find the tour guide and ask the person who brought me to the mall to talk to me. The official website said that you could request a refund within 30 days. I had no choice but to call Director Liu that very night. When he heard that I wanted a refund, he changed his attitude completely. He mocked and ridiculed me, saying something like, "If you don't have the money, then don't come on this trip. How can you return something that you bought?" My mother was in a bad mood because of this. She felt that it was because of her that we had wasted our hard-earned money. My original intention of giving her the jade was to make her feel better. I didn't expect that it would backfire. My family listened to the tour guide's words on the phone. I felt angry and sad. We came on a trip to have fun, not to spend money to be scolded. I was so angry that I said that I wanted to complain to him. Who knew that he wasn't afraid at all? He even sneered and told me that I could complain to him however I wanted. I didn't expect that there would be such an unreasonable person in this world. My chest was filled with anger and I wanted to seek justice. Chapter 9:30. The complaint line is either busy or unanswered. The middle-aged man laughed bitterly. In the end they just ignored it. Now my heart is cold. The old woman patted him on the side and her voice was a little hoarse. Forget it, just treat it as spending money to buy a lesson. We can't afford to offend them. The middle-aged man accepted his mother's words, but the mood of the family of four was not good. Hellion Vivian looked at them. Her voice was very light, but her eyes were filled with tenacity. She walked in front of the old woman and said, "Granny, don't worry. I will definitely make you return this jade bracelet. Keep the certificate and bracelet well. Don't drop them and don't touch this bracelet. In 2 days someone will give you an explanation." When the old woman heard Hellion Vivian's words she was very moved, but she still shook her head. "Miss, if you help us like this, those people probably won't let you go. I know you're a lawyer but you're a girl after all. What if something happens?" Hellion Vivian knew that the old woman was sincerely concerned about her. She chuckled and pushed Beligaju forward. "With him here, Granny, don't worry. My husband is very powerful and can fight very well. I'm not afraid of them." Beligaju did not expect that someone would push him forward. He looked back at her fluffy head. Hearing her call him husband was pleasing to the ear, so he let her be. However, even if a certain highness was indulgent, it was difficult to hide his nobility. After the old woman looked up and saw him, she kept praising a certain highness for his handsome appearance, just like on TV. Then she looked at the pair of little people standing behind Hellion Vivian and liked them very much. The middle-aged man saw that his mother's mood had improved a little, and the depression from before had dissipated a lot. He didn't know why, but it was probably because the couple in front of him looked too different. A glimmer of hope rekindled in his heart. Perhaps this jade bracelet could really be returned. Hellion Vivian asked the middle-aged man some other things, and the middle-aged man told her everything as usual. After about 10 minutes the two families separated. One family went to Renmin Road and the other family went to Westerner Street. Qingshan walked unsteadily beside Beligaju, trying hard to keep up with her father's pace. Beligaju's attitude towards the two little ones was the same. A free-range policy, so don't expect him to hold Qingshan's hand. Because if there was a gap, a certain highness would basically directly grab the little one by the collar and walk forward. Qingshan swayed her two short legs, and was carried by her father like a plastic bag. After blinking twice in a daze, she turned her head to look at Hellion Vivian and Bailey Shangxie. As the older brother, Bailey Shangxie was the one who understood his father's character the best. He quickly rescued his younger brother from a certain highness's hands, and then clumsily carried his younger brother forward. When he was young he was carried around by his father like a plastic bag. He definitely could not let his younger brother suffer the same because that would be really stupid. Little Qingshan was being carried by his brother, who was only a head taller than him. When he spoke he had to turn his little body. His childish voice was filled with logic and rigor. Pretty Wei Wei, this whole thing was a setup from the beginning to the end. That uncle must have been deceived by the driver and the tour guide. Qingshan spoke very casually, and did not forget to take a bite of the chocolate cake that Bailey Shangxie handed to her. This was the most important thing. The two little ones used their own pocket money to buy 6 pieces of chocolate cake. Originally they planned to eat it when they went back, but now it seemed that they could not hold it in. Hellion Vivian rubbed the little one's head. Qingshan had many inhuman abilities since she was young, among which were photographic memory and rapid thinking. Although she did not seem to have any demonic nature, in fact, all ghosts would automatically avoid her when they saw her. This was also the reason why she was not worried when Qingshan went missing from the beginning. Now this matter was just like what Qingshan said. Both the driver and the tour guide were problematic. The drivers were responsible for running around the periphery. When they encountered tourists, they were very enthusiastic to let the tourists let their guard down, and then pretended not to easily lead the tourists to the travel agency. In fact, there were already tour guides there. These drivers must have gotten a lot of benefits in the middle. Although she did not know how they divided the benefits, it was obvious that the whole thing was a trap from the beginning. This kind of situation should be common in Lee City. Otherwise, they would not have encountered the same situation at the airport. If this was the case, then the missing female university student. As if thinking of something, Helene Vivian's eyes suddenly darkened, and then she smiled meaningfully. Well, today's shopping time is over. Now go back to sleep. Tomorrow we will follow the driver to see who is behind these tour guides. Tomorrow? For the people who dared to have designs on Helene Vivian, a certain highness would not wait until tomorrow to deal with them. After arriving at the inn while Helene Vivian was washing up, Baligaju, who was originally lying on the bed and flipping through a magazine, reached out and put the magazine on the bedside, and then slowly tidied up his sleeves. The two little ones had just come out of the shower. Qingqin's hair was still wet and she was wearing a long bathrobe. She shook her little head twice and turned around to ask Bailey Shangxie, "Where's father going?" "Hunting." When Bailey Shangxie said these two words, a bloodthirsty red light flashed through his eyes. Then with a cool face he took the hairdryer that was bigger than his hand, and blew Qingqin's hair one by one. Qingqin was very obedient. She sat on the bed with her two little legs crossed and poked her little palm again and again. When Helene Vivian came out to get the shower gel, she saw this scene and did not notice that the bed on the left was empty. She took a photo of the two little ones with her mobile phone and posted it on her WeChat moments. The older brother is blowing his younger brother's hair, and his little face is very serious. In an instant her WeChat moments blew up. The rough men really could not sit still, especially old A, who held his mobile phone and typed hard, requesting to leave for Lee City immediately. Of course, there were also dissenting voices. In fact, Helene Vivian rarely used WeChat, but she would only post a status when she thought of it. This status was probably more than a year ago from the last one, and such a sudden move happened to coincide with the time when everyone was using WeChat. Naturally, it was seen by her former classmates. At the dining table of a restaurant in the capital, someone pointed at the mobile phone and said to Lady Qing, "Mingming, look, it's that Helene Vivian who used to compete with you for the campus belle. She even has a son and two at once, and both of them are so handsome." Chapter 931. I saw her at the entrance of Qingqing's kindergarten 2 days ago. Her child looks good, but it's a pity that she wasn't taught well. Her character is a little irritable and she even quarreled with Qingqing. But she's a child after all, it's normal for children to quarrel. I Weiwei have to take care of my child alone. Not only do I have to send my child to and from school every day, I also have to repair cars for others. My life is tough, but I didn't do anything to her. After all, we were classmates before. She's raising a child by herself? A few people present exclaimed in disbelief. The person on the phone couldn't believe it. How could this be? Where's the child's father? Li Meng shook her head and said in a noble manner, "Then I don't know. You know me. I don't like to ask about other people's family matters, so I just greeted Weiwei and didn't talk much." Seriously, she used to be our school belle. She was very mysterious when she was in school. Do you remember? At that time, we all thought that she came from the military compound. Back then, one of her clothes was enough for us to buy several of them. So many boys in school came to the law school just to catch a glimpse of her. I didn't expect that it would end like this. Someone sighed and shook their head. Li Meng smiled and said meaningfully, "What can you tell when she's in school? After all, she was still young. It's natural for her to use all kinds of methods to get attention." Meng Meng is right. The long-haired woman sitting next to the upper-class woman curled her lips and said in a disdainful tone, "How can a child who really came from the military compound be recognized by others? Like Meng Meng and I, we never talk about our families. Unlike a certain someone who was very impressive when she was in school. After graduation, everyone thought that she went abroad. She pretended to be so, but in fact she's just a car mechanic." Ah, interesting. These words were offensive. Meng Meng glanced at her and lowered her head to take a sip of the coffee in her hand. See, it's normal for some people to be vain. Perhaps Weiwei has her difficulties too. The class reunion is in a few days and I've asked her out. When the time comes, if she has any difficulties, we should help her if we can. Meng Meng, you're the best. Someone held Meng Meng's hand and asked, "Is Helene Vivian really repairing cars? That's so dirty. You'll get gasoline all over your body." Li Meng sighed and put down the coffee cup in her hand. It's not just dirty. That kind of work is not something a girl should do. When the class reunion comes, you will see. She has been living outside for so many years, but she doesn't even have a car. I'm afraid she has to rent her house. It's dangerous and tiring to send her child to school on a motorcycle. Hey, who would have thought that the great talent of the law department would end up like this? The person who called Du Cece shook her head and blew on the hot coffee in her hand. That's why it's better to be a person and not be too arrogant. When so many people in our school were chasing after her, she didn't even look at them. She always put on airs. Now she's an old woman and has to take care of her own child. What will she do in the future? Li Meng smiled. That's why we have to help her. When the time comes, we must let Wei Wei join the student union. We can't let her slip away. These words sounded like they were for Hellion Vivian's good. However, if one carefully analyzed the meaning behind those words, it was not difficult to understand what Li Meng was thinking. Perhaps some girls would be like this. After entering society, no matter how many years had passed, they would want to compete with each other to see who was better. Moreover, Li Meng had always held a grudge against Hellion Vivian. At that time, Hellion Vivian was better than her in every aspect. Originally, Li Meng was such a high and mighty girl. She was born in an authentic military courtyard. Although her father's position was not very high with her appearance, she was definitely a beauty who crushed everyone. However, ever since she was in the same class as Hellion Vivian, all her advantages disappeared. Fortunately, she was popular among the girls and was much easier to get close to compared to Hellion Vivian. However, the man she liked the most rejected her and told her personally that he liked Hellion Vivian. Even though she had clearly rejected him, the only person in his heart was Hellion Vivian. Until now, that man was still single. He was the school hunk of their school. After graduation, he would often be invited back to the school to give speeches. Not to mention his background, just his current achievements were enough to make many women infatuated. It was time to break that man's fantasy and let Xiao Zifeng see that the girl in his heart was no longer who she used to be. She was just a poor car mechanic. Thinking of this, Li Meng could not help but smile. She was really looking forward to the upcoming class reunion. That scene would definitely be very satisfying. The few girls then changed the topic to other topics. Everyone's expression was a little subtle. The night outside the window was getting darker. At the same time, in the old alley of Li City. In the early hours of the morning, the number of tourists on the streets gradually decreased. Occasionally, one could hear singing coming from the Tsongshan gate. A few locals gathered together and walked out of the alley. One of them was the tour guide who beat people up today. He and his brothers had just finished eating barbecue and the smell of alcohol still lingered on their faces. Someone said in his ear, "Big brother, that female lawyer today is not bad looking, but she's a little difficult to deal with. What are you afraid of? We have people behind us." Director Lu sneered and shouted to the front, "Remember, you don't have to be afraid of anything. If she continues to be a busybody, someone will take care of her tomorrow night." That female university student was the same. She insisted on causing trouble. Although I wasn't the one who led her, I still know the result. Those who obstructed that person's path and tried to expose this matter will not have a good ending. When the time comes, if that female lawyer doesn't listen to us, we'll deal with her. You can do whatever you want. When Director Lu finished speaking, the few of them were still laughing. However, after a few seconds, the laughter stopped. Director Lu suddenly bumped into the people in front of him and said unhappily, "Hey, what's wrong with you guys? Why didn't you stop?" The two people in front did not respond at all. However, the one standing in front of him began to tremble all over. Chapter 932. Director Lu cursed under his breath. Then, under the influence of alcohol, he pushed the person away. He saw a black figure standing not far from them. He wasn't holding anything in his hands, and the finely crafted white gloves accentuated his flawless fingers. However, he reeked of blood. The cold night cast a shadow over his body. Black feathers appeared out of nowhere, falling from the sky and landing at his feet. Director Lu was on guard. He took a closer look and sneered, "I was wondering who it was. So it's you. I didn't go looking for you, but you came knocking on my door." As he spoke, he winked at the person beside him. However, the person did not move an inch. His eyes were shaking and his face was filled with fear. Director Liu clenched his teeth and was about to push him away when the black figure slowly raised his eyes. His beautiful peach blossom eyes were completely dyed red. He looked like a vampire aristocrat in the movies who had turned into a demon, exuding a menacing aura that made people want to run away. The more handsome he was, the more dangerous he was. The more he smiled, the more darkness surged out from behind him. It was as if there was something behind him. Director Liu was so scared that he woke up from his drunken stupor. His face was pale and he wanted to run, but no one gave him the time to do so. The black shadow looked at him and slowly narrowed his cold eyes. In an instant, countless demons surged out from the darkness and bit the person in front of him to the side. Hot blood splattered everywhere. Ah! A blood-curdling scream echoed through the long alley. Director Liu could only watch helplessly as his companion was snatched away. Blood and flesh splattered all over his face. He wanted to scream, but he realized that he could not make a single sound. Fear swept through his body like a tidal wave. Other than the desire to live on, there was nothing else in his mind. He even wanted to kneel down and beg for mercy, but the darkness had already begun to approach him. Under the light cast by the moon, a devilish silhouette was reflected in the light. Amidst the sea of blood, that slender figure spoke in a low voice with a hint of laughter. His voice was very pleasant to the ears, but it also contained an aura that didn't belong to the mortal world. It was like the chanting of a demon. "I'm not as good-tempered as Wei Wei. I'll deal with you all tomorrow." The black feathers fell. It took only a few minutes. The long alley was plunged into darkness as if no one had ever existed. The figure watched the scene and curled his thin lips. He walked away with long legs and slowly merged with the darkness. After Hellion Wei Wei posted on her WeChat moments, she chatted with her brothers for a while. After assigning all the necessary tasks to Monkey and S, she looked up and saw a certain highness walking in from outside. She raised her eyebrows and asked, "When did you leave?" "Just now. I went downstairs to get a bottle of red wine." Bailey Jiaju lied without batting an eyelid. He glanced sideways and reached out to pick up 2 wine glasses. However, when his gaze fell on his gloves, his brows furrowed. Then he took off the glove on his left hand and casually threw it into the trash can. Then he turned his head again and met Hellion Wei Wei's eyes. Hellion Vivian walked over. "What's wrong with the gloves? Why did you throw them away?" "They're dirty." His Highness stopped her effortlessly and pulled her into his arms. Wei Wei always felt that with his Highness' temperament he shouldn't have dirtied his gloves. However, after thinking about it carefully, his Highness's obsession with cleanliness might have flared up, so she didn't think too much about it. She held the wine cup and started drinking. As soon as she took a sip of red wine, she received a message on WeChat. It said that there would be a class reunion in a week and asked if she would attend. Hellion Wei Wei had never liked to participate in these kinds of things. She was different from others. Others would only start working after their 4th year of university, but the reason why she went to university was only to cover up her identity as the Queen of Arms. That was why she chose to study law. Of course, young Master Tang had asked her to choose. In the Tang sect, everyone had a hidden identity. This identity would always be used to hide their true identity. In fact, she hadn't gone to class after her 3rd year of university, so she wouldn't attend any class gatherings. Unexpectedly, before she could refuse, the person on the other side spoke again. "We just happened to meet. Let's talk about your son hitting Ching. Hit." Hellion Vivian looked at the phone screen and raised her eyebrows. She swirled the wine glass and looked at Ching, who was still poking her palm cutely. She narrowed her eyes. She knew her son very well. Although he never played with children his age, he would not take the initiative to hit anyone, especially humans who were weak in his eyes. In some ways, the 3 of them were the same. They were extremely arrogant. Ching saw that Hellion Vivian was looking at her, so she ran over and held her little head for Hellion Vivian to smell. "Big brother washed my hair. Smells so good." Hellion Vivian felt that ever since De Bao appeared, she was basically dispensable in front of Ching. Bailey Shangxie was still wiping the baby golden water on little Ching face and hands. He was doing a very professional job. Hellion Vivian hugged the 2 little guys and kissed each of them. Then she picked up the phone and replied with one word, "Okay." Her son got into a fight. There must be a reason. She wanted to know how the other party had provoked Qinchin. Originally, when His Highness saw the words class reunion, his eyes began to sink. He had been in the modern world for 3 years, so of course he understood modern life. A class reunion mostly meant that there would be old sentiments. Although Bailey Jiaju didn't like to use this word, but when Helian Wei Wei agreed to go, his fingers paused for a moment, the color of his pair of eyes deepened a lot. Then he raised his head and finished the red wine in the goblet. His thin lips revealed a faint smile as if he was planning something. Bailey Shangxie knew his imperial father the best, including why his imperial father's gloves were dirty. He just didn't know what his imperial father was planning to do to his imperial mother. In short, his father was a shameless and pretentious person. Apart from his mother who would spoil him, the rest would only be afraid of him. Helian Vivian did not know that the content of her WeChat had been seen by His Highness. She lowered her head and arranged for the 2 little ones to sleep. She planned to settle the matter in Li City tomorrow and then fly back to the capital. Chapter 933. The driver thought that it was the same as before, that he had encountered a gullible fat sheep. He did not know that the small device hidden in Helian Vivian's long hair was very advanced. In addition to recording and video, it could also be synchronized to the internet. The driver didn't even realize that his license plate number had been taken down, and his words had been recorded. Just like what the middle-aged man described before, the driver brought Helian Vivian and the rest onto a tour bus, which was specially designed to pick up individual tourists. These buses would depart from a bus station in Li City on time, and each bus was accompanied by a tour guide. Helian Vivian's tour guide called himself Tour Guide Xiao, a native of Li City. He looked very humorous. During the 10-minute drive he talked about a lot of local customs. At first it did not sound like much, but the more he talked about, the more obvious the words about Jade became. At this time, some of the early risers on the bus wanted to take a nap on the bus, while others wanted to sit and chat with each other because they were all here to have fun. After all, the journey to the scenic spot was an hour long. Soon Tour Guide Xiao was a little unhappy. He glanced at the 2 girls who were whispering and said, "Don't talk nonsense when others are introducing you. This is polite. Listen to me. The most important thing is to have a good attitude. When you see something you like, you have to buy it quickly. We will arrive at the scenic spot soon. I don't want to see you there. Some people hide in the toilet and don't come out once they arrive at the scenic spot. We guides are not scourges. We don't have to be afraid of spending money when we are out to have fun. The things here are all good. Everyone knows that this place is close to Myanmar, so buy whatever you can." The whole thing was about Jade. Helian Vivian could feel that the 2 girls sitting behind her had a conflict in their hearts when they heard the tour guide's words. They were whispering about something. After arriving at the station, it was the Happy Town Jewelry Mall that the middle-aged man had heard of before. There were jade pieces everywhere, and there was also a stone gambling area underground. Every stone was marked with a price, and anyone who took a fancy to it could cut it. As the saying goes, one cut can be poor, one cut can be rich. This saying came from gambling on stones. If there was green in the stone, then one could make a fortune. Qinchin was originally very fond of this kind of thing. However, after seeing the stones here, she spread out her little hands. Not a single one of them had much green in it. Since he was no longer interested, he obediently followed Bailey Shangxie's lead and strolled around, looking at this and that. After taking a stroll, she returned and reported to Helian Vivian, "I've seen all of them. Basically, the price of each piece of jade is inflated. The foot-grinding jade that Uncle Monkey gave me previously is estimated to be sold for 40,000 yuan here. However, Uncle Monkey said that he only spent 4,000 yuan when he received it. So expensive here." "That's right." Helian Vivian smiled evilly, then pressed the Bluetooth headset. "Monkey, are you there?" On the other end of the phone, Monkey immediately stopped playing League of Legends on his computer and said excitedly into his earpiece, "Boss, is Little Boss looking for me? I knew Little Boss can't do without me." "Get lost." Old A pushed Monkey away. "Little Boss should be looking for me, not you." Helian Vivian could not help but hold her forehead. She waited for the other side to quiet down before saying, "Okay, let's get down to business. Monkey, find out who is the owner of Li City's Happy Town Jewelry Mall and what's the relationship behind it. Once you're done, send me a photo. I have 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, I want to see all the information about this place. Yes. When they entered working mode, the rough men were obviously different. Monkey was in charge of the invasion, while the others were in charge of the armed equipment. They had obtained the authority from young Master Tang. Once the evidence was conclusive, they could immediately arrest the relevant personnel in secret. Such an operation was S-level in the mainland. The S-level meant that no one would get the news, and all the deployment would be done directly by the Tang sect. Therefore, the sky above Li City was still calm and peaceful. Almost an hour later, tour guide Xiao walked over. When he saw the two female college students empty-handed and did not buy anything, his attitude immediately became very bad. He said to the two female college students with a cold face, "Both of you are here to enjoy the service, but the two of you are so good not buying anything. Next time don't come out to travel, it's better to stay at home." No one was willing to be talked to like that. One of the two female college students had a stronger temper and said directly, "We are here to travel, not to shop. We don't buy anything if we don't want to." When tour guide Xiao heard this, his nostrils suddenly widened, and he suddenly looked a little fierce. "Little girls, don't be so rash. Buying something is to ensure your safety." Seeing him like this, the other one was suddenly a little scared and reached out to pull her companion. A few tour guides looked over at the same time. They definitely did not look friendly. After all, they were all girls. If they were to quarrel outside, they would be the ones to suffer. Tour guide Xiao saw that they had shown their weakness and would not make any more trouble, so he impatiently asked them to stay at the side. He then turned to look at Hellion Vivian's family and saw that their hands were empty-handed. He sneered and walked to Beligaju. "You guys don't seem to have bought anything either. Brother, I'll give you the same words. Don't come out to travel if you don't have money. If you don't buy anything, how is this different from freeloading? If you are poor, then you should stay at home." No money? Poor? Freeloading? When Bailey Shangxia heard these adjectives, he held Qingqin's hand and slightly raised his head. How much gold, silver and jewelry were there in the demon world? If he told this human being, he would be scared to death. Moreover, when he was in England in order to find his mother faster, his father had already done a lot of things in the human world, let alone in China. In his opinion, this human was about to die. Because the smile on his father's face was too obvious. It was so obvious that all existences and dark creatures around felt a strong sense of uneasiness, including the two reapers in Qingqin's hand. Is this person stupid, huh? Is he stupid? Of all people to provoke, he just had to provoke the great demon. If he was unhappy, he could destroy the human world. Damn, he was retarded. This kind of person should be immediately taken to the 18th level of hell, so that he would not show off his intelligence in the human world. What? Not talking? Are you scared out of your wits? Chapter 934. Bam. Before Director Xiao could finish his words, he was kicked into the jade cabinet by Beligaju. He was in so much pain that he flipped back and forth. Beligaju tidied up his jacket and stepped on Director Zhao's back with a handsome smile. "Didn't you want me to buy something? How much do you think your life is worth? Name a price and I'll buy it." Director Xiao did not expect to meet such a tourist. Usually, the tourists he met either brought their families with them and did not want to make a big deal out of it, or because they were in a foreign country and had to worry about being surrounded if they made a move. Therefore, most of them would choose to swallow their anger and humiliation. Some were even afraid of him. No one dared to come up to him and kick him over. The anger in Director Zhao's heart overshadowed the pleasure. His mouth was full of blood and he kept coughing. He reached out to the tour guide and the shop assistant beside him, thinking that he must kill this kid and let him know the consequences of offending him. Such a big commotion was bound to alarm the security personnel in the mall and the local auxiliary police station not far away. These auxiliary police and tour guides knew each other. They surrounded Beligaju in 2s and 3s and were about to take him away. Hellion Vivian moved and stood in front of His Highness. Her thin lips curved slightly. "You're arresting people without asking for the reason? Are you sure you want to do this? Why do you have to ask for the reason when you maliciously hurt people?" The auxiliary police didn't speak. The person in charge of the jewelry mall was impatient. "Take him away now. How dare you cause trouble here? Don't you know whose territory this is? Helian Wei glanced at him and raised the phone in her hand. I've recorded the reason for the attack in my phone. Since the auxiliary police are here, I have something to say. This is Director Xiao. He forced people to spend money, slandered others, and humiliated the passengers. These things are enough for you to take him in and interrogate him carefully. According to the travel regulations, this has violated our rights as tourists. Now I am very suspicious. Does he have a travel permit? Also, is the price of the jade artifact here artificially high? Were the merchants and the tour guides colluding to cheat the tourists of their money? These things have not been investigated clearly. Sorry, we are just defending our legal rights as citizens by beating people up. Why should we be taken away? I think you really won't cry until you see the coffin. The person in charge of the jewelry store was furious. His face was full of muscles. All of our jade wares are A grade. If you can't afford it, just say so. Why are you stirring up trouble here? Take them away, take them all away. Hearing this, the auxiliary police began to move. Helian Vivian looked up at them. Her eyes were as cold as ice. She didn't speak to them but to the people on the other side of the earpiece. With these 2 words, Monkey started typing furiously on the keyboard. The person in charge and the tour guide were bent on letting Helian Vivian and the rest have a taste of their wrath. On the other side, Monkey had already sent a few examples of being cheated on during a trip to the Commission for Discipline Inspection in the form of a report. Then he directly uploaded the video sent by Helian Vivian to a certain Weibo and began to broadcast it live. This time he didn't immediately make this Weibo popular. Because it wasn't time yet. The others were all ready to go, waiting for Helian Vivian to give the second order. After hearing Helian Vivian's words, the tourists in the jewelry store were more or less a little apprehensive. They were afraid that they would really buy an overpriced jade. The cash flow at the transaction counter suddenly decreased. The more the person in charge watched, the angrier he became. He looked at Helian Vivian with eyes full of hostility. He looked as if he couldn't wait to beat her to death. His expression was extremely cruel. After standing up, tour guide Xiao didn't hesitate to speak magnanimously and asked the auxiliary police officers to teach them a lesson. These blind poor people didn't know how to be convinced. Helian Vivian looked at the nearest auxiliary police officer who was about to make a move. She slowly raised the ID in her hand and said, I'm a lawyer. The law I studied tells me that the victim shouldn't be detained in any form. If you don't know this, you can go back and flip through the textbooks. If you arrest me, you can forget about wearing this uniform again. The auxiliary police officer was obviously hesitant. The person in charge sneered. I, Co. Wang, have seen all kinds of situations. Why would I be afraid of a small lawyer like you? Now you're the one who doesn't have money. You're causing trouble here and you want to talk to me about the law? Who said we don't have money? Helian Vivian turned her head and took out the Gucci wallet from Beligaju's trouser pocket. She threw it over casually. There were more than 10,000 yuan in the wallet, not to mention various US dollars, euros, and 3 or 4 gold cards. The person in charge and tour guide Xiao looked at those things and suddenly felt like they were slapped in the face. The other tourists also understood what was going on. It was obvious that the other party wasn't like what the tour guide said. They couldn't afford the jade here, but they suspected that there was something wrong with it, so they didn't buy it. Helian Vivian raised her eyebrows and looked at the person in charge. It's the same whether we have money or not. No one is willing to be a fat sheep to be slaughtered. So what if we don't buy it because we don't have money? Doing business is all about being willing. If we don't buy it, do you have the right to insult the customers? We're here to have fun, not to look at anyone's face. We've spent money to sign up for the tour, so we should be respected. We shouldn't be ridiculed here after we failed to force a deal. Tour guide Zhao's voice was gloomy. You only have 400 or 500 yuan to sign up for the tour. We're the ones who paid as much as you asked. Now you're accusing us of paying too little? Helian Wei glanced at the surrounding tourists and said in a calm voice, Don't you think this whole thing is hilarious? Who made the tour guide of Li City so fearless? Enough. A man in a suit came in from the outside and looked around. He didn't speak to Helian Vivian but said to the auxiliary police officer beside him, Secretary Liang is still having a meeting nearby and is entertaining foreign guests. It's not good for you to be so noisy. Something has happened and it's affecting the public order, so solve it quickly. Do you still need me to teach you what to do? As he said, he turned his head and said to the person in charge of the jewelry, "Mr. Wong, Lee City is a tourist city and you're the biggest investor in Lee City. It's our fault for not doing a good job in maintaining order. If this lady doesn't want to buy the jade, then don't let her buy it. If word got out, it would seem that Lee City's management is not doing a good job. You know how much sleep the secretary has lost because of this." Chapter 935. You're right, Secretary Liu. After all, there is some misunderstanding in this matter. The person in charge of the mall said with obvious respect, "Of course, people who come to buy things are willing. We can't force them to buy or sell, right? This lady is overthinking." Director Xiao just gave her a few words of advice and she started beating people up. It's probably because of her strong self-esteem. I don't understand why she feels that her self-esteem is hurt and why she has to beat people up to vent their anger. Since Secretary Liu is here, let's forget about this matter. After all, we are doing business amicably for the sake of the construction of Lee City. Of course, we adhere to the principle of customer first. Since this lady doesn't want to buy, then wait outside. Don't slander the jade of our mall. It's really impossible for us to do business. After the person in charge finished his words, it seemed that Hellion Vivian and the rest were simply making trouble without reason. In fact, the truth was very clear. However, it was obvious that the secretary who came was on the side of the person in charge of the mall. Naturally, he knew how to give everyone a way out without letting the situation develop further. He glanced at the auxiliary police next to him and said, "In the future, it's wrong for troublemakers to disturb the public order regardless of their identity. This time we'll forget about it. The matter ends here. If anyone doesn't want to stay here, please ask them to leave." Yes. The auxiliary police also followed the order to enforce the law. Hellion Vivian looked at this scene and said slowly, "Wait a minute, Secretary Liu, right? You seem to have misunderstood the focus of this matter." Secretary Liu did not expect that the person in front of him would be so ignorant. A light flashed under the bottom of his eyes. During this period of time, the secretary had reminded him that the child trafficking case in Yun City involved a large area. The higher-ups were keeping a close eye on it and asked his subordinates to be more careful. He would have asked people to arrest these tourists long ago. Some nouveau riche always thought that with some money they could protect their rights. However, they did not think about who was standing in front of them. Taking a step back, if the other party was not a lawyer but an ordinary female college student, he would still teach her a lesson. People like her who made noise everywhere knew that there was a problem with the jade here. When the time came to check, they would definitely be held accountable. Thinking of this, Secretary Liu's expression turned cold. "Miss, do you know who you are talking to?" "I really don't know who you are. I only know that you're here not to help the people solve their problems, but to add fuel to the fire of Lee City's broken tourism industry." Hellion Weiwei looked into his eyes and suddenly smiled. "The main point has never been whether we buy jade or not, but how we are treated after we spend the money and get cheated. In other words, we are the victims. As a secretary, shouldn't you listen to what the victim has to say? Otherwise, Secretary Liu, how can you continue to be a secretary?" When Secretary Liu heard the last sentence, his eyes completely darkened. In his eyes, Hellion Vivian's actions were reckless. Secretary Liu did not know that before Hellion Vivian said this, she had already ordered Monkey and everyone else to take action. All the video content spread rapidly through the influence of a certain Weibo. This included all the recordings of the driver, tour guide, as well as the person in charge of the mall and Secretary Liu. Especially the attitude of the tour guide, it was to the point of angering both humans and gods. In addition to the summary of more than a dozen previous complaints. Soon this incident attracted the attention of all the netizens. This included the commander of Lee City, Inspector Jiang, who had once carried out a mission with Hellion Vivian. When he saw the video, his first reaction was that it was over. How could this group of people surround Hellion Vivian? What a bunch of fucking good-for-nothings. Inspector Jiang put on his military cap and was about to rush out. The soldier next to him was puzzled. "Major, it's almost time for dinner. Where are you going?" "Where am I going?" "To clean up the mess." Inspector Jiang turned around and pointed at Hellion Vivian on the screen. "See this person, if she's hurt, don't expect the Tang sect to be involved in future battles. That's the boss of the ghost organization. Heh, to think that a certain secretary is still thinking of getting in touch with the Tang sect. This time his secretary is going to block people. What do you think the consequences will be? The soldier shook his head, still confused. Inspector Jiang did not say anything to him. He picked up a Hummer and drove to the scene of the incident. At this time Secretary Liu smiled coldly. Miss, why do I find that you have a tendency to BS? Hellion Vivian took a step forward. Today I'm the one standing here. I can talk to you about the law to protect my rights. In fact, in China very few people know the law, let alone how to protect their rights. If the person standing here today was not me, but a university student who did not have the ability to protect herself, what would they face? Secretary Liu, have you thought about this problem? You can say whatever you want now. Secretary Liu's voice was still deep. But I'm warning you, don't think that you can incite the crowd just because you're a lawyer. I have the right to arrest you. As soon as he finished speaking, the phone in his pocket rang. Secretary Liu looked at the caller ID on the screen and picked up the call carefully. Secretary, yes, I'm at the jewelry store. What? Video? She's secretly recording? Secretary Liu paused and his eyes became more gloomy. He could not hear the rest of the words at all. Then he hung up the phone and called the person in charge of the jewelry store outside. He lowered his voice and said, "This is a little troublesome now, and it's not convenient for me to intervene. I'll watch outside later. Ask everyone to disperse and stop making things difficult for this woman. She seems to have a camera on her and she doesn't seem to be a lawyer. She's probably a reporter. If things get out of hand it won't be easy to clean up. But don't worry, we've just checked her background and she's not a big deal. It's easy to deal with her. When you disperse later, if she still doesn't let go of this matter, you can deal with her the way you dealt with that university student. But just one thing, try not to get to this point. Previously, because of the secretary, we were able to cover up the news of the university student's disappearance. Chapter 936. The matter on the internet was still fermenting. A secretary was very unhappy that it would cause such a bad influence, so he directly called the relevant law enforcement department. The law enforcement department that was reprimanded blamed the problem on the tourists and posted on Weibo, saying, when tourists encounter problems, the first thing they do is not to think about solving the problem, but to calculate in their hearts. Originally they said this to control public opinion. They did not expect that some of the words would be so eye-catching. Once the words were out, all kinds of disputes continued. Those who agreed with this statement praised them as enlightening. Those who did not even accept it even criticized the law enforcement department as robbers. There were too many tourists who encountered this kind of coercion. There was no need for Hellion Vivian to do anything, and there would be a continuous stream of people joining in the condemnation. True justice was often invisible. Most of the time, we did not make a sound because we were kind or did not want to cause trouble. But once the bottom line was crossed, no one would continue to ignore the existence of such behavior. Sometimes netizens really did not know what was the truth. But this matter was already very clear. The video explained everything and the truth was revealed bit by bit. This was clearly a trap set by the drivers, tour guides and shopping malls, as well as the lax management of the relevant departments. People did not have the right to make those who had been in a high position for a long time realize their mistakes. Because once the matter was out, they would only think of ways to explain. But there was such a power in this world. We have a tacit understanding, we express our opinions, we maintain our education and do not make too many judgments. But we have to let more people know what dangers were and how to avoid these dangers. The guru on Jihu wrote 3 essential points, which were suitable for each tourist city. Do not sign up for local individual groups, do not ask the local drivers and avoid eating at scenic spots as much as possible. After all, the incident of the sky-high price of fish was still vivid in people's minds. Such situations would not be put to an end. Because every city needed to be built. Without these economic sources, the local people would be the ones to suffer. The people who were really at the top wanted everyone to be harmonious. But the perfection of the system could not be completely implemented locally. Some people still had selfish motives. For example, a certain person in Li City thought that he could control the overall situation as long as the emperor was far away. But today's scene was something he had never seen before. However, compared to the one in Cloud City, he was much calmer and knew what to say at the right time. Therefore, he quickly asked a certain department to issue an apology on Weibo. Then he carried out a series of appeasement. After doing this, he narrowed his eyes and instructed his subordinates, "Tell Secretary Liu that when the heat of this matter dies down, think of a way to make the person who exposed it suffer a little. She dares to say anything, she deserves to suffer a little." When Secretary Liu received the news, he simply called Xiao Wang and told him that they would not interfere in this matter and that he could vent his anger however he wanted. However, there was still one thing to be careful about, which was not to let anyone know. Xiao Wang held the phone and looked down at the family who was still standing in the middle of the jewelry city. He smiled coldly. Secretary Liu's words were very clear. If it was at the beginning, he would still have some scruples. Now he was asking him to shut the door and beat the dog. As long as no one knew, even if he killed this little reporter, the guards outside would not rush in. That was easy. Xiao Wang glanced at the security guards and asked them to take the other tourists to the side. Then he personally went down to talk to Hellion Vivian in private. He did not forget that Hellion Vivian had a camera on her, so he disguised his attitude very well. Xiao Wang thought that if he lowered himself to invite her, she would definitely not notice. But he did not know that in the eyes of Her Highness, the dirtier a human being was, the easier it was to see through him. As smart as Hellion Vivian was, she only needed a glance to know what he was up to. Did he want to get rid of them secretly? In that case, she would accompany him and see who would be dealt with when the time came. After all, it was about time for a certain major to appear. "Please." Hellion Vivian was the first to speak. Bailey Jiaju glanced at her. No matter what the occasion was, his raised eyebrows always gave people a sense of noble arrogance. Hellion Vivian felt that she had to smooth over His Highness when they went back. After all, it had been 4 hours since they came out. His Highness was completely dragged out of bed by her. The devil's temper when he woke up would really last for a long time. Bailey Shangxie also knew how difficult it was to deal with his father who did not have enough sleep. Under normal circumstances, the entire demon world would tremble in fear because of him. Although he never spoke, he only sat in the highest position, supported his chin with one hand, and looked at everyone with a smile that was not a smile. But the lethality of it was not inferior to the explosion of an atomic bomb. "Let's stay away from father later." Bailey Shangxia's little face was serious as he reminded Qingchen in his hand. The little one nodded her head obediently, swinging her little hand as she followed beside Bailey Shangxia. When she walked, she would always sway. Seeing how cooperative the family was, Xiao Wang's smile grew wider. He walked around the corridor outside and brought Hellion Vivian and the others to the meeting room where secret deals were held every time. Cell phones were not connected here, and similarly the internet was not connected. Hellion Vivian could clearly hear the sound of the Bluetooth headset buzzing. A few sports cars sitting not far away started their cars at the same time after the video signal was cut off. They smoothly sped to the foot of Tsong Mountain, drawing beautiful arcs in the air one after another. The ghost had really made a move. At this time, Secretary Liu was still in a reception room outside the mall, drinking tea and waiting for Xiao Wang to solve the problem and give him a satisfactory answer so that he could vent his anger. One had to know that ever since he became the secretary, even the big shots in the business world had to respect him. A small reporter actually embarrassed him in front of so many people. He was simply tired of living. Has Xiao Wang made a move? Almost. He has been invited to the meeting room. There should be news soon. Then tell the people outside to stay in their positions. No matter what they hear, don't rush in. We won't interfere in this matter. The people beside Secretary Liu nodded. Of course they would obey the order. With such a relationship, President Wang did not have to hide anything when he did things. With a click, he locked the door and dragged Bailey Shangxie, who was the closest to him, over. With a fierce expression, he said, "This is more suitable for me to talk to." Chapter 937. Oh. Baligaju raised his good-looking eyebrows again. The unique evil of a demon broke out from his handsomeness. No one knew why. At that moment there seemed to be some kind of black fog surging behind him, but it was clearly broad daylight. His Highness looked at Xiao Wang with a playful gaze. His words, actions, and expression were all unhurried. The corners of his lips curled up slightly with a playful expression. "If I'm not mistaken, are you threatening me?" Xiao Wang laughed and then sneered. His eyes were gloomy. "It seems that you're not too stupid. Today's matter is to let you know what to care about and what not to care about. I'll count to 3. Hand over all the information about today's matter and squat down on the side. Otherwise, this child's pretty little face will be cut a few times. I can't guarantee that." Faced with such a threat, Beligaju only curled his lips and said indifferently, "I hate it when people threaten me." Hellion, Vivian and the 2 little ones heard this and nodded together. They sincerely agreed with this point of view. Fighting with His Highness would not end well in the end. Many people knew that the existence of a demon was a kind of sinister beauty. And this point was vividly displayed by Beligaju. Every word he said and every action he did seemed leisurely and elegant, but in fact the coldness in his eyes was the most common killing intent. After all, killing people had always been a convenient thing for him. However, Xiao Wang had been too carefree all these years. He did not know how terrible it was to offend His Highness. He sneered and began to count down. 1. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and looked at this person who was courting death. She was not worried that Bailey Shangxie would be hurt, but she and His Highness would deal with the person who kidnapped her son and threatened her in the same way. Therefore, before Xiao Wang could count to 2, Hellion Vivian pulled off her earphones with a snap. Xiao Wang only had time to see her turn around and knock the security guard to the ground. He was about to attack him. This change was too fast. It was so fast that Mr. Wang was caught off guard. He thought that even if someone was going to make a move, it would be that man. How did it become a woman? Xiao Wang didn't know about this. His Highness had never liked fighting. What he liked was killing. President Wang realized that someone was approaching him. He lifted Bailey Shangxie up and placed him in front of Beligaju. "I'm warning you, don't come any closer. If you take one more step, I'll throw him to the ground and kill him." Beligaju laughed again. He stood there condescendingly and said, "Haven't you had enough fun yet?" This sentence was not directed at Xiao Wang, but at the little boy in his hand. Everyone felt that something was amiss, including the bodyguards who were knocked to the ground. They felt that this was not something an ordinary father would say to his son. The most unsettling thing was the change in the little boy. He seemed to be smiling, the corners of his mouth curled up into a sinister arc. His gem-like eyes were filled with a blood-red cold light, which made everyone feel uneasy from the bottom of their hearts. President Wang lowered his eyes and looked at Bailey Shangxie in his hand. He could not see any fear in Bailey Shangxie's eyes. Not only that, there was a noble arrogance on Bailey Shangxie's cool little face, as if he was mocking his stupidity. "Go to hell." Bailey Shangxie said these 3 words very slowly. It was so slow that Xiao Wang's face turned pale. He didn't know why, but an unbelievable thought flashed through his mind. The little boy in his hand wasn't a human at all. How could a child have such a terrifying aura? Xiao Wang was frightened by his own thoughts. It was as if he was bitten by a snake. He thought that Inspector Jiang had come because he felt that the video had a bad influence on him. He chuckled and said, "Major, don't worry. The things that should be dealt with have almost been dealt with. No one will say anything in the future." Chapter 938. Rest assured, my ass. Did I say that I would let you handle it? Have you ever considered other people's feelings before acting on your own accord? You're simply courting death. Inspector Jiang took a deep breath. Don't tell me that you've made a move? Secretary Liu was very puzzled. Is there a problem? There was a big problem. Inspector Jiang pushed him away. Then he grabbed him and gently patted his face. I have to let you see for yourself what exactly went wrong. At this moment, Secretary Liu faintly felt that something was not right. At this moment, the sound of tires screeching on the road sounded behind him again. However, this time, it was fiercer and more violent than when Inspector Jiang came. 6 sports cars lined up in a row in front of him. S walked out of the sports car with a submachine gun in one hand. After seeing Inspector Jiang, he smiled. Old Jiang, it's better for us to stand up for boss. Whoever interferes in this matter will be arrested immediately. Wait a minute, I want to say that I'm with him. When Inspector Jiang saw that all 6 of them had moved out, he cursed. Then he solemnly pointed at Secretary Lu. We're not on the same side. I'm here purely because I saw Boss Wei Wei in the video and came to help. We know. Old A also came over. He held a gun in one hand and put his arm on Inspector Jiang's shoulder with the other. Although you're a little wretched, you won't make a mistake when it comes to righteousness. The corner of Inspector Jiang's mouth twitched. Are you praising me? Of course, Old A said very seriously. Inspector Jiang was about to go crazy. He couldn't tell that it was a compliment at all. At this moment, Secretary Lu was already shocked by the scene in front of him. He was afraid that he would be so scared that he couldn't speak for the first time. Even his legs were a little weak. That was a genuine submachine gun. In the mainland, only special forces were allowed to carry it. Moreover, why were these people here? Their eyes were filled with murderous intent. Soon Secretary Lu knew why that murderous intent was. This was because a slender young man bent his knee and placed one hand on his shoulder. He heavily pressed his knee against his abdomen. His voice was cold and emotionless as he said, "Where did you take our boss and little boss?" Boss? Little boss? I don't know what you're talking about. Secretary Lu was really confused. He had never seen any boss or little boss before. Who are they? He didn't even dare to guess the identity and background of the person who acted so recklessly in front of Major Jiang. The pain made his thoughts even more chaotic. Suddenly he seemed to have thought of something. As soon as Major Jiang came over, he asked where the woman who recorded the video had gone. Beside that woman, there was indeed a man and 2 little boys who looked like they were not to be trifled with. Could it be? That man was the boss they were talking about. Secretary Lu made wild guesses. Young L looked at him coldly. The female lawyer you said didn't know what was good for her is our boss. Secretary Lu was stunned and felt a chill from the bottom of his heart. He recalled the order he had just given, Inspector Jiang's attitude towards this person, and the 6 sports cars they drove and the assault rifles they raised. He suddenly realized that he might have made an unprecedented mistake. Because he had investigated the other party's check-in and found that it was just an ordinary inn, he determined that the other party was a lousy reporter with no background. She wanted to expose something, so she pretended to be a lawyer in front of them. But now who could make Major Jiang personally take action? When Secretary Lu thought of this, all the color on his face seemed to have been drained and he was extremely pale. Could it be that they had offended someone they shouldn't have offended? Misunderstanding, this is all a misunderstanding. Secretary Lu's forehead was dripping with cold sweat as he tried to explain. The young man raised his eyebrows, but his expression didn't change. The video was already out, but the signal was cut off. Do you think the people from the Tang sect are fools? Will they believe what you're saying now? Tang sect. These 2 words were like a flash of lightning, shattering the only hope in Secretary Lu's heart. He asked people to surround and beat up Tang, the people from the Tang sect. The young man didn't talk to him anymore. He grabbed the person with his left hand and pressed the gun down with his right hand. I'll ask you one last time, where are the boss and little boss? Secretary Lu looked at the black muzzle and was so scared that he almost peed. His fingers trembled as he pointed in the direction of the conference room. There. Bang. Without thinking, Old A kicked the door of the conference room open, and the few of them quickly cut in. The young man was still dragging Secretary Lu. Tiao Wang, who was standing with his back against the door, thought that the people who had barged in were his helpers. He said generously to Beligaju, who was gradually approaching him, "Don't think that you can play hero here just because you're a little better. Let me tell you, we have people and backgrounds." As he spoke, he waved his hand as if to signal the people behind him to attack together. But after waiting for a long time, there was no movement behind him. There was only Beligaju's thin lips curled up, revealing an incomparably mocking smile. Hellion Vivian also laughed. She leaned against His Highness, raised her eyebrows and said to the person in charge, "If I were you, I would want to see who is behind this before giving orders." Xiao Wang paused and immediately looked behind him. Facing him was a submachine gun. Then Secretary Lu fell to the ground. What was going on? Although Xiao Wang was used to being unreasonable and killing people, he had never seen a real gun. When the gun pointed at him, his legs immediately went weak. But he didn't expect that the most painful thing was not being pointed at by a gun. But what happened next was the actions of the man who he thought wouldn't make a move. His Highness's posture when beating people was as beautiful as ever. With a stretch of his hand, the entire conference room was filled with the sound of bones breaking. With that kind of sound, even Inspector Jiang felt pain when he heard it, let alone President Wang, who was a fatty, couldn't bear it. But when His Highness beat people up, he would let them choose. Do you prefer your left leg or your right leg? Xiao Wang said his left leg, so he broke his left leg. Xiao Wang held his left leg in a cold sweat. He didn't dare to say his right leg anymore. His Highness simply broke his arm and watched him struggle on the ground. He only stopped when he had one last breath. Chapter 939. Xiao Wang could no longer speak. At that moment he would rather die than be in such pain. A few rough men stood in a row at the side and watched this scene. They silently looked up at the sky. As expected, they had a very high estimation of danger. When they first saw this man, they felt that he was not to be trifled with. Hence they were very smart not to make a fool of themselves in front of him. However, although they had expected this man to be very ruthless, they had never thought that he would be so ruthless. Such a beating was more painful than taking someone's life. How did their boss sleep with him? This beauty looked handsome, but he was prickly to the touch. A few very curious rough men whispered this question in Hellion Vivian's ear. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and said, "Can't you see such an obvious answer? What he covets is my beauty." The rough men. This was really not too obvious. After all, the other party was the one who was truly beautiful. Wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. Hellion Vivian frowned. Why am I the one who slept with him? Sounds like I forced him. The rough men exclaimed, "It's been so long. Why did you only realize the other layer of meaning behind this? It's just a matter of time. Do you understand?" Hellion Vivian seriously educated her subordinates. "I never force people. I chased him down." The rough men chuckled. "As long as you're happy. A woman chasing a man. As a domineering CEO and an arms tycoon, should I wait to be chased?" Hellion Vivian reached out and patted the rough men on their shoulders. "Do you know why you don't have a girlfriend now? You don't even have the skill to chase people. Don't say that you're a member of the Ghost in the future." The rough men felt like they had been shot in the knee. How could they break through? Indeed, they should activate this skill. But the key was their boss. "You're a woman. Why would you activate the skill of a domineering CEO and an arms tycoon? In those novels you read, which domineering CEO is a woman? Tell me. If you tell me, I promise I won't beat that author to death." Hellion Weiwei looked at the few rough men who were as sad as withered cucumbers and felt that her counterattack was awesome. After she finished speaking, she walked in front of Bailey Jiaju with an expression that said, "This man is under my protection." Qingchen had already stretched out her hand to support her forehead. She did not want to look at Vivian, who was still confused about her position. Bailey Shangxie felt more and more that his mother's valiance came from the inside out. Yes, very valiant. Baligaju, on the other hand, was very satisfied with his captive phoenix's knowledge in certain aspects. Looking at Hellion Vivian leaning over, he only felt that it was cute. It was like a little fox that had recognized its master. How could it not be cute? Then he leisurely glanced at the few burly men. The look in his eyes was very obvious. He was warning them not to say anything that they shouldn't say. Once again, the rough men felt that if their boss fell into the hands of such a man, there would be nothing left of her. However, Secretary Liu, who had watched from the beginning to the end, was so scared that his fingers trembled a lot. On the ground, Hu Wang stretched out his hand, blood bubbling out of his mouth. Secretary Liu. At this time, Secretary Liu did not dare to get close to him. He raised his head and looked at Inspector Jiang. "Major, I am not familiar with this person at all. I really did not know that he would be so brazen." "Shao, you said you didn't know?" Before Secretary Liu could finish his words, Hellion Weiwei's voice slowly interrupted him. "Then why didn't the auxiliary police officers stationed outside rush in when they heard the commotion? Instead they used something to block the door. It doesn't seem like you don't know about this." It seems like you and Director Wang want to surround and silence me, Director Wang, since I know about this. After saying that, Hellion Vivian opened her left hand. Elle skillfully placed one of the guns in her palm. Hellion Vivian walked towards Secretary Liu and pressed the muzzle of the gun against his arm. Why don't we play a game? Which hand do you like? Secretary Liu heard that and collapsed. Cold sweat kept flowing down his body. Other than fear, there was only fear. Hellion Vivian immediately narrowed her eyes. It seems that this conference room has existed for a long time. I am definitely not the first victim. Now let me ask you, did you kill the missing female university student? If your answer satisfies me, I may not fire this gun. Okay, tell me, why did you kill that female university student? Where is her body now? Secretary Liu knew that he could not hide this matter anymore. The first thing he thought of was to get rid of his crime. No, I didn't kill her. I was only in charge of communication. That female university student found that there was a problem here and wanted to report it to the higher-ups. Recently, the higher-ups have been very strict. The secretary's work is not allowed to make mistakes. CO Wang also wanted to continue with his business, so he wanted to teach that female university student a lesson. Later, CO Wang made a mistake. He probably saw that the female university student was good-looking, so he overdid it. He also wanted to give that female university student some money to settle this matter, but that female university student was not willing to do it no matter what. She even wanted to expose this scandal. CO Wang simply did not stop and killed that female university student. It sounds like it's all CO Wang's fault. Hellion Vivian tilted her head and smiled. The gun handle was pressed against his face. Secretary Liu, do you think that my IQ is especially low? That I will believe whatever you say, huh? Since you know all these things that CO Wang dares to do, why didn't you do anything? Is CO Wang the only one responsible for this matter? I will say it one last time. I want to hear the truth. If you can't tell me the truth, I have 100 ways to make you regret meeting me. Secretary Liu was already regretting it now. The pain of having a gun pointed at his body could not be described with words. Fear made him completely collapse. All of this was my boss's intention. Because he has to return to the capital during this period of time, he has to do something. If there is even a little bit of negative news, it will lead to a strict investigation. Moreover, what CO Wang has done can't be undone. We can only think of a way to make that female university student completely shut up and pretend that she is missing. If a relative comes to ask, we can say that the girl was wearing revealing clothes and went out alone, which is why she was harmed. When CO Wang caught that female university student, he claimed to be her friend, so this method will definitely work. Hearing this, Hellion Vivian's eyes became even colder. People like you are worse than vermin. After saying that, she put away the gun in her hand and looked up at Inspector Jiang. We want to thoroughly investigate this matter. Young Master Tang personally gave the order, and your garrison troops will cooperate. Anyone who wants to fish out Secretary Liu and that person will be taken away. Now let's go find that person. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.